We're 1084. Be advised, we have numerous injured people on board, babies.
And we believe there are numerous members trapped in the vicinity of the west side of that building in the collapse zone.
Of the names continues here at the World Trade Center Memorial as family members, many of whom still waiting to get in to visit the name of their loved one that's etched in bronze around two large reflecting pools in the footprint of both of the towers. Looking at where the South Tower once stood, there's the South reflecting pool, and then the North one now just coming into view. The Twin Towers were obviously iconic parts of the city's skyline. And the 16 acres that comprise the entire World Trade Center site also contained other high-rise buildings, subway and commuter train stations, even a huge underground shopping mall. We took it all for granted until 9/11. Every time we look toward Lower Manhattan now, there is that blank space in the skyline, a horrible void. Yet as New York buildings go, the towers were fairly new. Take a look. New Yorkers had been talking about building a World Trade Center for 20 years before ground was broken on Manhattan's Lower West Side on August 5th, 1966. Older buildings had to be demolished. The North Tower started going up in 1968, the South Tower 5 months later. The first tenants moved in 1970, even before construction finished on the upper floors. Ribbon cutting was in 1973. The towers were full of innovations. At 110 stories, they were the tallest buildings in the world, at least for a little while. Each floor was about an acre of open space, their weight distributed between a central core and steel columns in the building's outer skin. High-speed express elevators and sky lobbies on the 44th and 78th floors made getting to the top quick and efficient. The complex even had its own zip code, 10048. Iconic additions to Manhattan's skyline, the World Trade Center never stopped attracting attention. In 1974, a daredevil tightrope walker crossed a steel cable he'd strung between the towers, not just once, but 8 times.
There is somebody out there in a tightrope walk between the two towers of the World Trade Center, right at the tippy top.
But as the years went by, the towers, symbols of a city, a country, and a way of life, also became a focal point for hatred. In February 1993, a van packed with explosives was detonated in a parking garage under the North Tower. 6 people died and about 1,000 were hurt. The Islamic extremists behind the attack were rounded up, tried as criminals, convicted, and sent to prison. But the international terrorists who inspired them kept plotting and struck on that crystal-clear morning in 2001.
A plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
It took 8 months for bodies to be recovered and for 1 million tons of twisted steel and concrete to be cleared away. Plans for a new and even taller skyscraper were revealed quickly and changed repeatedly to make it stronger and safer. The new One World Trade Center will have a reinforced center core, extra fireproofing, biochemical filters, and even green technology. Groundbreaking for the main tower, One World Trade Center, took place in 2006.
We are going to soar to new heights and reclaim New York's skyline with this magnificent symbol of our freedom.
Today, the still unfinished tower just pokes above the skyline on its way to becoming the country's tallest skyscraper, 1,776 feet at the tip of its antenna, matching the year of U.S. independence, 1776.
Yes.
That is, of course, One World Trade. Formerly it was called Freedom Tower, but now it's One World Trade. The new tower is supposed to be finished in 2013, thanks to the folks at earthcam.com. We can show you exactly how much progress construction workers have made in the last 7 years. Take a look at this amazing time-lapse video. This is 70 years of time-lapse video showing what's going on at the once and future World Trade site. Earthcam.com's cameras on the rooftop of the Millennium Hilton, about 58 floors up. Let's watch this. We're awaiting President Obama's arrival in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Later, actor Tom Hanks and boat captains who took part look back on the rescue effort that saved 500,000 people trapped here in Manhattan after the towers fell.
Hundreds of boats converged on the city, leaving the sun-bathed harbor behind them. Dead ahead, the unknown.
As hundreds of patients are being brought in and being treated, we cannot tell you, we would not even begin to guess what the numbers in this will be, how many people will have died by the time this day is over, how many injuries have taken place in both Washington.
That was what was being reported at this moment 10 years ago today. That was Aaron Brown with CNN on air at the time. Each year around September 11th, Jeff Parnas and his volunteers go to a disaster-stricken community to help them rebuild. It's their way of saying thank you to the cities that provided help to New York after the 2001 terrorist attack. His group has also become the custodian of the national 9/11 flag, which was damaged at the World Trade Center site. People in all 50 states are helping to stitch the flag back together. Jeff has been nominated as a CNN hero for his efforts, and today he's in Joplin, Missouri, which obviously was devastated by a tornado last May. Jeff, for you, being in Joplin on this day, 10 years after what happened here in New York, what's this day like for you?
You know, it's a beautiful day. We can't let terrorists claim this day, and we should claim it for all the kindness and the humanity, the volunteer spirit that brought all Americans together, not just on 9/11, but especially on 9/12. To have all the folks in Joplin hold the national 9/11 flag here at their ground zero, it just reminds us we're all in this together.
And what was it? I mean, 9/11 really changed your life. You embarked on this whole idea. When did you come up with the idea of the foundation?
You know, it was my 5-year-old son, Evan. He'd seen stories on CNN about the California wildfires back in 2003. Told me he wanted to send his toys to the kids cross country. We drove a truck from New York to San Diego filled with relief supplies with a big sign that said, "New York says thank you." It was my way of paying personal homage to my friend Chagai Sheffi, who was killed in the towers. But I wanted to make a bigger statement that New Yorkers would never forget what people from small towns all around the country, all around the world, did for us in our time of need. Just a couple months later, Evan was still 5. He was watching the Weather Channel and asked me, "Dad, when Josh and I grow up, can we drive the truck if there's a tornado in Iowa?" Today, New York Says Thank You is probably one of the largest volunteer organizations in the country, using the 9/11 anniversary not just to rebuild buildings, but to rebuild hope and spirits of folks in Joplin, and to just, through action, through positive action, let folks know that today is our day. Today is a day when we're going to act, when we're going to volunteer, when we're going to go out of our way to be places like Joplin, Missouri, to say we'll never forget not just what happened on 9/11, but more importantly what happened on 9/12.
So you hope that this anniversary and the anniversaries in years to come are not just days of remembrance where people stay at home. You really hope they're days of action where people go into communities and reach out to others.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the best vindication of who we are, to celebrate that kindness and humanity and compassion. Pick up a shovel, hand a bottle of water, come to Joplin, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, go to other places impacted by disaster and do something very simple. Be kind to your neighbor. You know, we had all these children here in Joplin, Missouri, holding the national 9/11 flag just a few moments ago. And I told the kids, I said, you're the 9/12 generation. You're the next 10 years. And I think it's so incumbent that we never will forget the tragedy. We'll never forget the images. But it's so important to teach and inspire and educate and activate our children for the 9/12 generation, the next 10 years, that the best way to pay honor to all those who are lost is to take positive action, do something, volunteer.
And we're seeing actually people stitching, repairing that 9/11 flag. What kind of an impact does that experience have on the folks who are doing it? I mean, you've been traveling around the country with this. I mean, literally physically touching the flag and being able to you know, take needle and thread and actually help bring it back to life.
You know, Anderson, it's been the most humbling privilege as a New Yorker to be able to travel around the United States and let soldiers and school kids who survived the shooting in Fort Hood stitch the national 9/11 flag, and World War II veterans on the deck of the USS Missouri, family of Martin Luther King Jr., wounded warriors, military veterans, first responders, teachers, kids, 9/11 family members. We've had over 30,000 people return this flag to its original 13-stripe format. In just a few minutes from now, the people of Joplin are going to take American flags that survived the Joplin, Missouri tornado and finish and complete the restoration of the national 9/11 flag. And You know, it's really become our modern-day Star-Spangled Banner. And I think it's the beauty in the fabric. It's not even about the fabric, it's about all the people. It's about all their love for this country and their neighbors.
Jeff, for those who want to help your organization or maybe partake in this, what's the website?
Sure, the website is newyorksaysthankyou.org. And I just want to share with you, it's 10 years and we've just gotten started.
Jeff, remarkable what you've done in those 10 years. Appreciate you being with us on this day.
Thank you.
He feels the moving ahead part so much.
Yeah.
You know, he's done amazing work.
Yeah.
We would like to now welcome our international viewers, as well as those of you here in the U.S. It is a very special, very somber day here, the 10th anniversary of the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001. I'm Candy Crowley here with Anderson Cooper at the site of the World Trade Center, where they're dedicating a new memorial to the victims. President Obama was here earlier. He is now on his way to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Later, he will be at the Pentagon. This is not only a significant day in U.S. history, many countries are different because of 9/11, none more so than Afghanistan. We have our CNN's Suzanne Malveaux and Nick Robertson with us today, and sadly, we begin with breaking news about yet another terror attack. At least 77 people were injured by a truck bombing at a NATO base in Afghanistan. Taliban militants are claiming credit. We want to start with Suzanne at Camp Eggers in Kabul. Suzanne, what do you know about this attack?
Well, Candy, you know, this is certainly the kind of thing that people worried about. There was a lot of anxiety about this. This happened about 60 miles west from where we are, in a place, a province, the Wardak province, outside of a combat outpost. Essentially, there was a car bomb, a truck bomb that pulled up at that outpost. There were a bomb went off. You had 2 Afghan civilians who were killed. And as you had mentioned, there are significant numbers of injuries, at least 77 American soldiers, 25 Afghan citizens who were injured in that bombing. We are told that much of those injuries, however, are minor injuries, which is a good thing. Candy, I had a chance this morning to talk to General John Allen. He essentially is the head of the U.S. and NATO mission here in Afghanistan, to get a sense of how significant this is and whether or not he believes this is a sign that the Taliban has been strengthened or weakened. Here's how he put it.
This attack was a high-profile attack. It was a pretty significant suicide vehicle bomb. But they have been ejected from the population in so many places around the country that their only ability to influence the battlefield on many occasions is simply the high-profile attack.
And Candy, what he said essentially was that this is the Taliban that is actually desperate, if you will, that these are the kind of high-profile attacks that they have to carry out, that are expected almost, because they have been so weakened. One of the things that he told me, as well as many of the soldiers here, is the importance. Really, the mission has changed here. It's a different phase. It is about training the Afghans and training them quickly to get them up to speed, to go ahead and conduct their own security, to protect themselves, their own country, by the end of 2014. That is when it's slated that U.S. and NATO combat troops will be coming home. Candy?
Thanks, Suzanne. I know you're going to stick with us as we look into the international implications and ramifications of 9/11.
Yeah, 10 years ago, Al-Qaeda's leadership, of course, was in Afghanistan. Today, many of those leaders, including Osama bin Laden, are dead or in custody. But Al-Qaeda keeps adapting, evolving, obviously still remains dangerous. CNN senior international correspondent Nick Robertson has spent much of the past decade in Afghanistan. He joins us now live in Kabul. Nick, obviously word of yet another bombing is of great concern to U.S. authorities, to NATO authorities. In terms of the strength of the Taliban, how would you assess it today?
They're still active in the south of the country and in the east of the country, the Pashtun part of the country, which is their ethnic background and their ethnic heartland, if you will. They still have significance over large parts of the community there. A number, I believe it's now 9 NATO soldiers have been killed this month in smaller attacks, 1, 2 or 3 in different shootings or different roadside bombings. So the Taliban is still able to make themselves felt with deadly effect. almost every day around the country here and intimidate the population. So the population and the NATO forces very aware of what the Taliban can do, even though they are small in number, even though their military leaders are being targeted every day. I was here on September the 11th 10 years ago. The Al-Qaeda was here at the time. The Taliban were running the country. But obviously what we see now with Al-Qaeda, it's very, very much a changed situation, pushed out of the country, but their threat still hasn't gone away.
Kabul has changed dramatically in the last decade. It has grown fast, and international aid has poured in to support Afghanistan's fragile democracy. 10 years ago, when the Taliban was still in power, Al-Qaeda had a presence here in Kabul. Now, the remnants of Al-Qaeda are hundreds of miles away to the south and east of here, in training camps across the border in Pakistan. It was in Pakistan that Osama bin Laden was killed, and where this man, Yunus al-Mauritani, a senior Al-Qaeda operative, was captured last week. Mauritani was the handler of this man, Shahab Dashti, a German jihadist. He had come from this nondescript mosque in Hamburg to an Al-Qaeda camp in Pakistan. He wanted to fight US forces in Afghanistan. But Mauritani told him to go home and launch attacks in Germany. Dashti never made it. He was killed in a drone strike. And that's become a familiar pattern. Al-Qaeda recruits from Europe, even America, reaching Pakistan's Badlands, and US drone attacks trying to eliminate them and their mentors. One such recruit, Bryant Neal Venus from Long Island, New York, a Christian convert to Islam, radicalized by firebrand friends and what he read online.
So over the last 10 years, that's led to an increase in the types of material that we're seeing, and almost, if you will, an arms race of competing sophistication for making their material more accessible.
And that's the new Al-Qaeda. It's different branches pumping out their jihadist message online. Perhaps the most influential, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and its charismatic mouthpiece, Anwar al-Awlaki.
We know that they continue to plot against the United States and against other Western countries as well. So the situation in Yemen remains a serious one for us.
Then there's Al-Shabaab in Somalia, drawing recruits from as far away as Minneapolis in Canada. The growing strength of Al-Qaeda in North Africa, a stone's throw from Europe. It may yet benefit from the unrest in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt, making the job of counter-terrorism even more complex. The lone wolf.
You have all of the related AQ groups, all of the terrorists, all the Islamist groups. And so we have to watch out for them, and we have to watch out for lone actors.
Times Square bomber Faisal Shahzad was one of them. He had training in Pakistan, but when he came home, acted alone in building his abortive car bomb. But he was an amateur, and building bombs, according to Al-Qaeda recipes, is an inexact science.
The mixture which I'm making is one which I don't have great confidence. Some of them will probably injure the person making them.
But the danger is that eventually someone will have enough training and ability to build a deadly device. Najibullah Zazi, an Afghan living in Denver, came close.
If enough people get hooked on this sort of publication, this particular publication, and practice what it preaches, then some of them will succeed in causing the havoc and harm that they set out to do.
It's not just another attack that worries this former top DHS official, but the sheer volume of soft targets. Malls, hotels, power plants, rail networks.
If I was still on that job, I'd be very worried about today, Al-Qaeda exploiting those vulnerabilities, because, you know, we have a lot more work we have to do.
10 years on, the battle against Al-Qaeda is very different, but far from over.
Not only different, but it's spread out across the globe now. Somalia, North Africa, Yemen. The problem of the Al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan has sort of metastasized, if you will. It's become a much harder issue to tackle. Anderson, Candy.
The Nick, thanks very much, live from Kabul.
Thanks, Nick. Nick is also going to stick around, I think. 372 of the people who died in the World Trade Center here attack were citizens of countries outside the U.S. And many other countries, Britain, Spain, Indonesia, and India, to name just a few, have been through terror attacks in the past decade. The war on terrorism truly is a global war, and like it or not, the U.S. remains the leader of that war. With us now, CNN national security analyst Peter Bergen and my colleague from CNN International, Becky Anderson. Thank you both. Let me talk first about, I think there was this feeling sort of after 9/11 from some countries, the U.S. now understands what we've been through, because terrorism was sort of last to come ashore here, and that maybe there would be more help or more understanding from the U.S. in certain places. Do you think that panned out? Because we keep seeing poll after poll that shows that the U.S. still, particularly in the Muslim world, is not viewed favorably at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, the place where Al-Qaeda continues to be headquartered is one of the most anti-American countries in the world, which is Pakistan. Right now, we have a 12% favorable rating in Pakistan. So certainly the attacks on 9/11 and our subsequent actions haven't turned into any great love in the Muslim world, quite the opposite. But that said, Al-Qaeda is losing the war of ideas in the Muslim world as well. It's not the fact that the United States isn't loved isn't the end of the day. The real important thing is that Al-Qaeda is disliked. And in poll after poll, bin Laden, Al-Qaeda has been losing the war of ideas in Indonesia, Pakistan, other major Muslim countries. And so that's a good thing. That was even before the Arab Spring happened, in which they played no meaningful role.
I think also that people in security now, for example, in Britain, are wondering just who or what might be the threat going forward. It may not be jihadists, for example. It could be Irish republicanism in the UK still, or even a lone right-wing extremists like we've seen in Norway in the past. So I think there is definitely a reconsideration of what the threats are, and certainly in London, for example, where I'm from, as we move towards the London 2012 Games, I think it's less about where the states sits now and whether they are loved or not. For us, certainly in the UK, it's, what is the security planning for the London 2012 Games? Well, its alert level is certainly in planning is severe, which means an attack is highly likely, whether it's actually carried out or not, or it's successful or not. I think, there is a sense that terrorism is still out there, but who might it be now? And that's changed.
Well, so in that sense, is there a global war on terrorism, or is there a British war on terrorism, and a U.S. war on terrorism, a Pakistani war on terrorism? I mean, I know that there are certain places where we exchange intelligence, but really, how far can you go in calling this the global war on terrorism?
I think you make a very good point. I'm not sure it is a global war on terrorism anymore, is it?
Well, I mean, it depends on the example. I mean, if Becky was in London, I think, when the planes plotted the summer of 2006, which would have been the biggest 9/11 style attack that Al-Qaeda was trying to do, bring down 7 American planes, 7 American, British, Canadian planes leaving Heathrow. Well, that plot was interfered with because British, Pakistani, and American investigators, law enforcement, all cooperated to stop it. So in that sense, there is a sort of certainly global cooperation. Is there a global war on terror? I mean, that's sort of a Bush administration term that has sort of become defunct. Certainly there's a war against Al-Qaeda and its allies, which is President Obama's more narrow definition, which I think is appropriate, names the enemy. It's not a war against a tactic. Suggests that you can de-ally yourselves from Al-Qaeda. We're no longer at war with you, as what we're trying to do in Afghanistan is get elements of the Taliban to say they're no longer allied with Al-Qaeda. So certainly, the way that we frame this has certainly changed, and I think it's a good thing. I mean, a global war against terror is open-ended. There's no end. Terror has been around for 2,000 years. And I think, the 10th anniversary, it's a moment to actually say, well, look, is this time to move on from this, is making this the principal frame of our national security? My view, it is. I mean, Al-Qaeda has not carried out a single attack in the United States since 9/11. The last successful attack in the West was in London, the 7/7 attacks. That was 6 years ago. These guys, they have shown themselves to be not very capable, and we've also put a huge amount of pressure on them, not least killing their leader.
And so would you say, as I asked this question of General Hayden at one point, is Al-Qaeda more of an organizational threat or an inspirational threat? In In other words, the name out there attracts people going, yeah, I believe in that, you know. I mean, I know you don't like the term lone wolf, but I mean, do you get the feeling that as an organization, Al-Qaeda is less of a threat than it is as just the idea of it?
Well, I think certainly for some elements of the, for example, British Muslim community, that will still be an inspiration. Whether there is the organization that was there in the past that might have taken some of these characters out of Britain into Pakistan or into the madrasas as they were in the past. I'm not sure whether it's clear that that's still as potent a force as it was in the past, but I think the inspiration, certainly for those who want it, is still there. You're certainly not seeing the sort of fiery rhetoric in the mosques in Britain that you were seeing in the past, and that's been very successfully sort of stamped out. And there's certainly more sort of understanding about how you challenge people and their ideas, but I think the inspiration certainly is still there.
Just quickly, Peter, if I could ask you, just because in 2002 you called 9/11 the largest intelligence failure in American history, no dispute. Have the huge gaps been fixed?
Yeah, I mean, there are 800,000 Americans with top secret clearances now. That's probably a few, maybe 100,000 too many.
Does that sound more safer to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the plane spot of the summer of 2006 that we were just discussing. This was a huge intelligence coup. I would actually amend what I said in 2002. There was a lot of intelligence in the system that an attack was plausible. It wasn't really processed.
To put it together.
It wasn't processed entirely by the CIA and FBI weren't talking to each other. That's changed. You know, I think we have a lot of the intelligence picture is infinitely better now.
Peter Berger and Becky Anderson, stick with us. President Obama is now on his way to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That's where our John King is. And John also talked to Vice President Biden, who candidly recounted what he experienced on that day. You are watching CNN's special coverage of the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
Kind of gray, clearing away. We are, I guess, Jeff, I want to know what's behind the smoke, but I have the worst feeling is that very little.
And the fact is that we've already been hearing from
You got United 93?
United 93.
Yeah. Descended.
What's that?
I just saying, it looked like he descended there. There is now on the United 93. Yes. There is a report of black smoke in the last position I gave you.
Everyone who visits this site, whether it be a VIP or a member of the general public, note how different it is from the other major 9/11 landmarks, the World Trade Center in urban New York City, the Pentagon just across from the nation's capital, urban Washington, D.C., Shanksville, a tiny town in coal country in western Pennsylvania. Different also because the terrorists chose to target the World Trade Center. They chose to target the Pentagon. Shanksville is in the history books, part of our 9/11 legacy, because the heroes on that flight, the 40 passengers and crew, decided to fight back. And when they did, it resulted in the plane crashing violently into the field you see behind me. This site is very solemn for another reason. The site is different for another reason. That was the beginning of a conversation. I had an exclusive interview with the Vice President Joe Biden when he was here in Shanksville to pay tribute. I want to ask you first, this is an amazing place. Do you think, as Americans remember, that they understand the difference here? It's not just a memorial, it's the resting place of those heroes.
I don't think they do. I don't think they realize that some of these poor people were literally vaporized. I mean, they were, and the field that we didn't go on to, I know you know this, that we didn't go on to, where that rock memorializes where the plane actually hit, there's parts of their families all over that field. I don't think most Americans know that.
And so what goes through your mind as you're here on this site and you're remembering, but it's just extra sensitive.
And these weren't soldiers, these weren't military people, these were Americans who knew they were doing something bigger than just trying to get rid of a bunch of hijackers. They knew they were saving people's lives, and they gave their own.
I was at the White House that morning, and when we were evacuated, they thought maybe it was coming our way. Turns out people think it was probably going the Capitol's way. These people could have saved your life, saved your staff's life.
Look, I literally got off the train just as the Pentagon got hit. And I'm walking up, and I found out everybody was out of the Capitol. I said, well, we should go back in. I get up on the Capitol steps, and the Capitol, they said, incoming plane, incoming. You got to get out of here, Senator. You got to get out of here. Now, obviously, I don't know for sure. No one knows for absolutely sure, but it appeared as though, what, 30 minutes out, 20 minutes out? This aircraft. So they could have, and I thought that the president said it well. President Clinton, he said, they would have not only taken hundreds of lives, but they would have taken down the symbol of what constitutes the heart and soul of the government.
How different would it have been? I assume you have no doubt, I have no doubt, the country would have rebuilt, the country would have rebounded. But how different would it have been if the terrorists had that image? The dome of the Capitol stripped off?
I just think it would have been profoundly more difficult. I think it would have been a rallying cry to every extremist, every jihadi in the world, and taken down the symbol of ours in the minds of the rest of the world, our financial empire, the trade towers. It wasn't Wall Street, but that was the image. But to actually take down, you could have heard it now, not just the British, sacked, the Capitol. I mean, I think would have been a lot tougher. And it would have been tougher for Americans, psychologically. Right. It would have been tougher for Americans.
I want your personal thoughts on a couple of things before we do. You're in the room when the raid is playing out on bin Laden. And true. You know when you come into the room what the goal is. I assume you had to have maybe wrong choice of words, but a pretty serious case of the jitters about, oh boy, we better get this right.
Well, look, what I had my first thought was, we were sending in a whole hell of a bunch of special operators, helicopter pilots, SEALs and others that who were really doing something that was absolutely, if you put it on paper, which we did, and when rehearsed it, knew every detail of it, was remarkable. Everything had to work. And so the first thought was for their safety. I know that's, well, anyway, that was the first thought. The second thought was that if this were to fail, the psychological impact it would be for bin Laden and for Al-Qaeda, and the negative impact it would have in terms of our sense of the United States' sense of our capabilities. And but it was remarkable what they did. I mean, absolutely astounding.
Any moment when you're watching the feeds coming in and getting the briefings where you start to think,
Well, at the very beginning, as you all know, I mean, when we was relayed to us that, look, there were 5 of us who had been involved in the planning of that for 3 months. I think it was 3 months before that. And the last month, the group was larger. So we literally, the president and I, knew every single operational move. I mean, it wasn't like we were generically informed. We knew the helicopter A was supposed to land here, helicopter B here, so-and-so's get out here. And when the first 2 things didn't occur, the first thought was, oh, God. But the adaptability of these guys was astounding. Yes, that was the one moment when there was that, when it was relayed to us that it didn't go exactly as planned in the front end.
So let's rewind the tape. Take me back to that moment you talked about when you found out you're on the train coming to Washington. That's when you find out something's happening. Maybe you're not sure exactly what it is. Take me back. Run me through that morning.
Well, literally, I used to commute every day. I got in the train. I was leaving. I took the early train. My wife was leaving the school to teach school. She called me on my cell just around Aberdeen, Maryland, which is before Baltimore, and said, Joe, my God, my God, Joe, a plane just flew right into the World Trade Tower. What do you think that means? And I said, honey, I don't know. And then she said, okay. And she said, I gotta get ready. And she called back in a few minutes. She said, and she was literally said, oh my God, Joe, oh my God. There's a plane, it's running right, oh my God, it ran right into the second tower. And I said, honey, this is a big problem, man. This sounds coordinated. And with that, by that time, other people started getting calls on the train. But we went into the Baltimore tunnel, so you lose the coverage as you go into the tunnel there. By the time I came out, there was I had everybody in the train. I knew all this. Coming up, Senator, what's going on? What happened? And I said, I'm not sure, And I said, we all were listening we were making calls. I got off the train. I walked out of Union Station. I could see off to in my case, 1 o'clock, and this big plume of smoke. It was the Pentagon. And everybody was saying, well, it's a car bomb. It's a truck bomb. No one knew what it was. And then we got up, and everybody had been evacuated from my office. I went in to make sure everybody was out. And we were standing out there in that park alongside the Russell office building. And I said, we ought to go back into the Senate. I mean, I don't think it looks good, us leaving the Senate. And I started walking back up, and that's when a law enforcement officer said, Senator, there's a report of an incoming aircraft. We got to get out of here. And it was just, it was almost unbelievable. And, you can appreciate. That's why I said about President Bush today. I mean, imagine being president, having that news given to you and having to react and trying to compute all this and figure exactly where to go. I mean, I thought the way he handled events from that moment until we took down the Taliban was textbook.
Thank you. Vice President Biden, coming up, we're really a very moving piece. I really urge you to watch. We're going to talk to kids who lost a parent on 9/11, their remembrances on the 10th anniversary of the attacks. We'll be right back. Back to our continuing coverage. We're coming to you live from the World Trade Center memorial site overlooking the site, and what an extraordinary sight it is this morning. Thousands of family members who have been allowed in, and today is really their day to be allowed in on the grounds. Tomorrow, the memorial is open to the public, but today it is for families, and we have seen so many scenes of women and men and small children standing around these giant, enormous pools, and you really get a sense of the size of them when you look at how small the people are as we pull out on that shot. There's two pools, obviously, and the North Tower is the one I believe you're looking at right now, and then there's the South Tower as well. We're waiting to hear from President Obama and Shanksville, the memorial observance there. We'll obviously bring that to you live. As many as 2,000 children lost parents in the terrorist attacks of 9/11. And we have seen so many children out here today, some too young to even remember their parents. Many children lost uncles or aunts. At least 100 September 11th widows were pregnant when their young husbands died here. Their babies are now 3rd and 4th graders, and boys and girls who were toddlers on 9/11 have grown into teenagers. We talked to some of them recently.
On 9/11, I lost my father, John Robinson Lenore.
Benjamin Keith Clark. He's an executive chef.
My dad was Alvin Romero.
My uncle's name was Edward Lichshine.
Sergeant John Coughlin.
Nobody else has lost a parent on national television, on the news. Nobody else has seen it happen over and over again. And that's something that we all have to live with.
My mother sat us down and had every cop's kid's worst nightmare talk that Daddy wasn't coming home. My little sister at the time just screamed out loud.
I do not remember a good 2 years of my life because I just emotionally have blocked it all out.
Yeah, I don't really remember anything about it. Sometimes I think it was a better thing that I didn't know him and then he was taken away from me, or if it was a worse thing that I didn't get to spend the little time I would have known with him.
And when your friends complain, oh, my dad's so annoying, or he won't let me go out, or he won't let me do this, it's you get mad because you would do anything to have that, and they complain and they don't really appreciate what they have.
If we're talking about 9/11 in class,
and everybody would turn around and stare at me.
They almost know that I was affected by it directly.
Sometimes it makes me feel a tiny bit agitated, because it's not like I would want to be known as, oh, his dad died, his dad was killed. I don't want to be known as that. I just want them to know me as me, like for who I am.
And my baby brother.
So moving. Some of the young people that we heard from just now are affiliated with a group called Tuesday's Children. It's a nonprofit family service organization that's committed to helping kids worldwide who felt the impact of terrorist incidents, and sadly there are many of them. Monica Eichen joins us now. On 9/11, she lost her husband Michael at the World Trade Center. She's the founder of September's Mission, an organization devoted to building a positive and meaningful legacy out of the events surrounding September 11th, and has been instrumental in the building of the memorial here. On a personal level, obviously, what is today like for you?
It's so, I can't even put into words. I'm so proud. We're so proud of this memorial. And I'm so amazed that it's here. It's finally here. And, I can finally go see Michael. He's home. They're all home. We can go there anytime now. And
this feels like a place you would want to come, and you feel like Michael is here.
Absolutely. He is here 100%. And I know he's here. Every time I come here, I feel the energy. It's powerful, and I connect with him here. This is where he took his last breath, his last step. This was where he was last. I never had remains back. And even if I did, it wouldn't matter. This is where I want to go to honor my husband. He turned 47 on September 8th, and I look forward to coming here next year and celebrating his birthday.
Where was he working?
At Euro Brokers on the 84th floor of the South Tower.
Is his name grouped with others who he worked with? Because that's something I found fascinating, that many family members could request that their loved one be grouped with people they worked with or knew.
It was a great thing that Michael Arad came up with, the design to have the names done that way, because those individuals who needed to be together could be together. Michael is with all his friends, and they were together trying to help another fellow co-worker. She went under the desk, and they're all together, and it's so nice to see that they were together, and they continue to be together today. And it's a nice way to honor them all.
And one of the things that I've really been moved by today is just watching everybody touch the names of their loved one. And there's something very powerful in that, wanting to have that tactile experience of being able to touch something.
It's like them. You want to touch them, and you feel very connected to that name. It is a powerful experience. Yeah. And I highly recommend everyone to come here and see this world-class memorial. And can't wait for the museum to open now, and I look forward to that as well, making sure that, the stories are never forgotten. Our loved ones will continue to be here, come and honor them, reflect. Just a place of hope and reverence now, and so breathtakingly beautiful. And I hope the families really feel what I've been feeling when I come here, and I'm so happy, I'm honored that I can share it now with the world. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be here tomorrow to greet some of the first visitors, and it's such a pleasure to be able to do that. Being a board member of the National September 11th Memorial Museum, it's just so nice that I can come here now and greet some of the visitors and say, here it is.
I think this is going to become probably the most visited spot, obviously, in all of New York. I would recommend
100%.
Anybody who comes to New York to come here if you want to see not just the history of what happened here, but the strength of New York, the strength of this country.
Absolutely. We're so proud of it. We are proud to be an American, proud to share it with the world. This is the world's memorial, and I can't wait for people to come here and make the pilgrimage to see it, because I think everyone's going to leave with some powerful experience from being just here.
Let me just ask you, because you have obviously a hugely personal affiliation here with Michael having been killed here. But for the other Americans that come, what is that experience for them, do you think? What do you hope it will be?
I think people want to just come and honor them and see what took place here and feel it, because they really feel that they can't experience it without coming here. And anytime I've been at this site and I come here, people want to come in. They're like, how do we get in? We want to come and honor them and see what happened here. They can't get in here fast enough. It's mind-blowing how people really want to experience the site and pay their respects. They really do. And you don't have to have lost someone to do that. And they can come here and honor anyone. They want to feel it and experience it as well.
I also think, we folks who are watching this on television now, I don't think pictures do it justice. I don't think pictures, I think the camera is too kind of small to kind of take in the enormity of not just the physical space, but just the emotional enormity of it. When it was in the design phase and you were seeing designs, did you have any sense of what it was really going to be like, or was it the first time you heard that water and felt the power of it and saw the name that it really, the full impact of it?
Really, it was the first day that I actually came to the site and I saw how large the pools were. I just was blown away. Pictures, TV, it just does not do it justice. It doesn't, because you can't get the full scale of the power of this space. 8 acres dedicated to this amazing world-class memorial. I mean, and the museum is going to be unbelievable as well. So, you know, it's definitely something that when you come here, you're going to be in awe of it, like I am. It's breathtaking, breathtakingly beautiful, and I'm so proud, so proud.
We're so sorry for your loss, but thank you for being with us on this day and talking about Michael and about the memorial. Appreciate it.
I want to share it with the world.
Monica Eichen, thanks so much.
Very welcome.
President Bush was visiting a Florida school the morning of the 9/11 terrorist attack. Next, the Air Force One pilot who flew him back to Washington, but certainly not by the direct route.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The elevators on the 44th floor, don't use them. They're about to come down.
Shortly before former President Bush made that short speech in Florida, he had been at a Florida school. That was when his chief of staff, Andrew Card, whispered to him that without a doubt, America was under attack. The president wanted to fly directly back to Washington, but because of safety concerns, it ended up being a long, uncertain day of flights and stops, military bases in Louisiana and Nebraska, and then finally back to Washington. Mark Tillman was Air Force One's pilot that day. He joins us now. Colonel Tillman, thank you for being here. When did you stop to say what a day that was?
Yeah, it was pretty much after we had landed in Washington, D.C. Once we'd given the president back to the Marines, Marine One, to take him to the White House, at that point it gave us a chance to reflect on exactly what had occurred during that day and analyze exactly what we had done and was it the right move.
Now, you were friends with President Bush. You have great admiration for him. Absolutely. But this was very early on in his presidency. He hadn't even been president for a year yet. I wonder if you learned anything about him that day.
Most definitely. There was reports that we were running scared around the country, and that wasn't happening. We had tremendous communication. He was able to contact the ground. I saw a leader in action, in my mind, a military man. He'd been trained in the military as well. He was able to make a lot of decisions, and he had his senior staff with him, Mr. Card as well as Mr. Fleischer. Everyone was right there with him, giving him the information. He was executing as a military man would do and make decisions right on the fly.
At some point, I know you quickly got a military escort. The first decision was to land in Louisiana. Then you went from Louisiana to Nebraska.
Yes.
Was there a rationale for that you were aware of at the time?
The first stop in Louisiana was to get him to a secure base where he could have capability to contact and address the American public.
The closest one, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
Right.
So we were in the northern part of Florida, the northern panhandle. Barksdale Air Force Base had a nuclear mission, extremely secure. My recommendation was to go there. They had great security. They also could refuel the aircraft rather quickly. We filled the plane up with gas, about 14 hours of gas, because we knew we had to be airborne for the rest of the day, waiting for the decision to go back to Washington. Once things had settled, we were ready to head back.
And why did you go to Nebraska then? Why was that the next stop instead of flying around?
We couldn't get word that the Washington area was safe to bring them back to, the landing zone being safe. So the goal was to then get them to another base which could get them underground, which would keep them safe, at the same time give them the ability to communicate with the National Command Authority, everyone else he needed to, while we saw Washington and got the word. As soon as Washington was safe, he was to come right back to us, and we'd take him right back. But as history shows, he was there a minimum amount of time, and he made the decision to come right back to us and let's head home.
As you were flying, did you do anything out of the ordinary yourself? I mean, obviously you don't generally have those guys right off your wings, and there were certain things, you were landing places you didn't expect to be landing. But were there maneuvers or anything you had to take?
No, there was no evasive action and stuff because there was no actual threat coming on us. All the threats were what we had perceived. You know, we knew they were hijacked airliners. We were past at one point Angel was next. Angel with a classified call sign. So we had to figure out exactly what Angel was next actually meant. Were we a target? And in that case, we assumed we were. So it could be a bombing, could be passenger on board that we, had plans. So we started working up and down the manifest, made sure the bombs, there were no bombs on board, bomb swept the aircraft one more time, airborne. So everything was set up for us.
So you were sweeping the plane while you were in the air?
Our cops were working back and forth in the plane. Everybody gets bomb swept before they come on the plane.
Right.
So we're extremely confident everything was set, but we weren't going to take any chances.
And was there a time, when did you reach out to your family? I mean, this was, buildings were blowing up, frankly, in two cities and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in an airline crash. When did they cross your mind? When did you have a chance to talk to them?
I didn't get a chance to talk to the family at all, and that was kind of a command decision for the rest of the crew as well. I had them all take their cell phones, put them in a little area, shut them all off. I didn't want to take a chance that anyone would give away the location of the president, so no one was allowed to contact their families till after we landed in Washington.
Was there someone that told them you were safe? And clearly they knew that since you were with the president, I guess.
I had passed to my deputy to let all the families know that everyone's fine, but no one was allowed to call home.
Interesting. Colonel Mark Tillman, now retired. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
You can find the official story, the events of September 11th, in the book-length report put out in 2004 by the 9/11 Commission. But the most vivid accounts come from the people who literally only made the report's footnotes. One of them is a fighter pilot who was ordered to find and possibly shoot down a hijacked passenger plane. CNN investigative correspondent Drew Griffin tracked him down. Take a look.
8:46 a.m., Otis Air Base, Cape Cod. Tim Duffy, a commercial airline pilot for United, was working his second job, on alert, as a fighter pilot with the Massachusetts Air National Guard. Duffy, footnote 117, is given the order to scramble his F-15. There is a confirmed hijacking. The order for Duffy and his wingman: take off from this now deserted airfield.
Otis Tower, I have an active air defense scramble, F-15s climbing to flight level 2900.
Under orders to find and intercept American Flight 11.
So these were the two hangars?
Yep, these are cells 3 and 4. They would have jets in all of them. You just depending on what jets you're going to need that day, and these were the ones that were armed up. So we had hot missiles and a hot gun, so they're all armed up.
By the end of this morning, Duffy will be asked if he is prepared to use those missiles to bring down U.S. passenger jets. And that meant he might be shooting down a plane carrying his United Airlines colleagues.
And they just said, be prepared to shoot down the next hijack track. And the guys came back and said, Roger. And then they came back right after that and said, do you have a problem with that? That kind of ticked me off. That's why it kind of sticks in my memory for that call. Being in that situation, if I wasn't ready to do whatever was called for, I was the wrong person in that seat.
Amazing. Drew Griffin with us now. This is going to be an amazing hour of TV. What touched you the most, I think? Because these are all people sort of heretofore unknown.
Yeah, ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things that day. What struck me the most is the guilt so many of them still carry for not doing more, or doing the right thing, or doing that little thing that they thought may have protected one, two, or all three of the planes. And they have carried that guilt with them, despite the fact that the 9/11 Commission cleared them, that their companies or their institutions said they've done a great job. They just feel a tremendous sense that they were not there on the front lines doing exactly what they needed to do that day.
Drew Griffin, our special investigative correspondent. Tell us again when we can see this.
9 o'clock tonight, footnotes of 9/11.
Eastern time.
Eastern time.
It's such a fascinating idea that he basically went through the 9/11 Commission report in the footnotes and kind of found these stories that were untold. A really great idea tonight at 9. Next, what it's like to be Muslim in the United States a decade after 9/11. And later on 9/11, Dick Cheney was vice president then. Donald Rumsfeld was defense secretary. Andrew Card was White House chief of staff. Andrew Card is the man who actually whispered in the ear of then President Bush at that elementary school. We're going to hear from each of them in our next hour. And later, actor Tom Hanks, narrating the story of a heroic boat captain, multiple heroic boat captains who rescued nearly 500,000 New Yorkers on 9/11, an untold story.
The great boat lift of 9/11 became the largest sea evacuation in history, larger than the evacuation of Dunkirk in World War II.
President and the First Lady, they are now there getting ready to prepare to lay a wreath at this memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We're watching what's happening in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Obviously, what's happening at the World Trade Center remains in New York, the new memorial there, also here at the Pentagon. Let's watch and listen for a moment as the President and the First Lady prepare to lay this wreath.
Cameras down.
So the President and the First Lady, they're in Shanksville earlier in the day. They were in New York. They'll be heading here to the Pentagon later to lay a wreath as well, and then there'll be a formal memorial service at the Kennedy Center here in Washington later tonight. We're continuing our coverage on this, the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attack. Joining us now, two special guests. Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota is joining us. He's the first Muslim elected to the United States House of Representatives. Also joining us is Genevieve Abdo. She's an author and writer, author of the book Mecca and Main Street, Muslim Life in America After 9/11. Genevieve, thanks as well for joining us. Congressman, first to you, what goes through your mind knowing that, we're talking 10 years ago, 19 terrorists, 15 of them from Saudi Arabia, all Muslims, attacked the United States and killed some 3,000 people?
Well, what's going through my mind today, as it was 10 years ago, is an overwhelming feeling of solidarity with my fellow Americans, overwhelming sorrow for the people who we lost, but then a great deal of pride for the people who ran into that burning building and tried to save fellow Americans. And the people who tried to rescue fellow Americans were Muslim, they were Christian, they were Jewish, they were Baha'i, they were people of no faith, they were people of all faiths, and they didn't care who was in that building. If they could save them, they did. And so that's what I'm feeling today. I mean, yes, of course, we could talk about, civil rights, profiling, and these things are important to discuss. But today, I'm just feeling I'm just remembering a lot of affection for Americans lost and Americans who stood up and met the moment with heroism.
Genevieve, you spent the last 10 years reporting on, researching Muslims in America. How has the Muslim community in America changed as a result of 9/11?
Well, they have become much more involved with Islam. They identify more with Islam. And this is true particularly, Wolf, of the younger generation. They're very involved in their mosque communities. So what's happened, I think that we see not only anecdotally from all the communities I have visited, but also according to the polling results, what we're seeing is that as Muslims have become more identified with Islam, a majority of Americans actually have more negative feelings toward Islam and Muslims since 9/11.
And that has sort of sparked this reaction, because you would think that maybe after 9/11, younger American Muslims would become less religious, more secular, if you will. But what you're learning is that it's just the opposite.
Well, I think that this is true among religious Muslims and among young Muslims, that they feel that they have comfort now in Islam because they are joining organizations, Muslim students associations, for example, on campuses, on college campuses. Even a college in the middle of the Midwest in a very remote area has now a Muslim students association, and this wasn't true 10 years ago.
Well, Congressman, you're in the Midwest, you're in Minnesota right now. Is that your experience as well, that younger American Muslims, younger women, for example, they're wearing headscarves, more traditional look? Is that your experience as well, Congressman?
Yeah, it is common, but I want to just caution viewers that this is not necessary. This is not a bad thing. I mean, these are what I'm seeing is Muslims who want to do more volunteer work at clinics to serve people of all faiths, that they want to get more civically engaged and offer leadership and volunteerism to community organizations and get more involved in the process. So while it is true, I think that Geneva is right, that there is the greater identification. It's not an us versus you identification. It's people saying, you know what, this is my country and I'm going to do something about it through the vehicle I know best, which is my faith. But this is not necessarily a thing that anyone should be worried about. In fact, the people who commit acts of terrorism generally do these things for political grievances, and the people who reject them because religiously it's an immoral, wrong thing to do.
Let me bring Geneva back into the conversation. You agree with the Congressman?
Yes, I didn't hear all of what he was saying actually, but I think that you know that the Muslim community is much more cohesive now than they were before. I think that their leadership, for example, like Congressman Ellison, their leadership has become much more involved. They've empowered themselves after 9/11, and that's the positive side of what's happening.
Are you worried, Congressman, about American attitudes here towards the Muslim community, not only in the United States, but indeed around the world?
Yeah, you know, Wolf, I'm worried, but I'm not overly distressed. And the reason why is that the people who are driving Islamophobia are a fairly small group of people who spend night and day trying to whip up anti-Muslim hatred. They're identifiable, they're small, they're well-known. And my experience is that even if Americans who are of other faiths, you know, may have a not positive attitude toward Muslims, when they meet people of the Muslim faith and they see that people are just like them, generous, loving people, good neighbors, good co-workers, then a lot of that fear dissipates and goes away. I just think that, you know, our whole country needs to be reminded about the importance of religious tolerance, that religious tolerance is enshrined in the first clause of the First Amendment, in which the Constitution says Congress shall make no law establishing a state religion or abridging the free exercise thereof.
Geneva, as you know, we're seeing really dramatic changes unfold throughout the Muslim world in North Africa and the Middle East. How is this going to play out here in the United States as far as American attitudes towards Muslims is concerned and the U.S. relationship with the Muslim world?
Well, I think that what we've seen from the Arab awakening, as we call it, is that Muslims all over the world want some form of pluralism, some form of democracy in their countries. I mean, it could take much longer than we expect for there to be, for example, a democratic system in Egypt. But I think that it shows Americans that Muslims are, you know, they want to become part of the modern world. They don't want to be alienated from the West. And so I think that that's a very positive story that with some luck will show Americans that maybe the kinds of negative feelings they've had about Muslims are incorrect.
Geneve Abdo with the Century Foundation here in Washington, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congressman Ellison, as usual, thanks to you as well. And our coverage continues right now.
September 11th, 2001. A brilliant morning turns dark with terror, and a nation comes together. 10 years later, if only for this morning, the sense of unity, determination, and sorrow is back. We've seen it, heard it, and felt it. A morning with tears, memory, and still a morning that looks to the future, a day filled with anticipation. Welcome to our viewers in the U.S. and around the world to CNN's continuing coverage of the 10th anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks. All of us have indelible memories of the day's events. We've seen more remarkable things this morning as well. The day is far from over. Right now, President Obama, who was here earlier, is at the memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the crash site of Flight 93. Later, he will visit the Pentagon. Joining us now here is Andy Card, the former White House Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush. I guess you'll always be remembered for that whisper.
It's an iconic picture, but I am not an iconic person.
Well, you know, so much has been made of that picture in terms of the president's reaction, and did he look like he didn't know what he was going to do? And I know you've been over all of that, and I thought maybe I'd ask you something this way. Is there anything that this president did that day that surprised you?
Well, I was a little bit surprised that he reacted so calmly when I said words that were so outrageous. But I actually was pleased with how he reacted.
And tell us the words again, just for people.
I said, a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. And then I stood back from him so that he couldn't ask me a question. And I kind of thought he might turn and look at me or start to talk, and I did not want him to do that. So I was pleased that he focused on those students.
Why didn't you want him to do that?
First of all, it was a very, very public forum. And I think that any dialogue would have been misinterpreted probably by both of us. And it was also contrasting to me that there were these very innocent young students and a very mature, seasoned, skeptical press corps. So there were two very different audiences sitting in front of the president.
How much did you think about what you were going to say to him with the words, the actual words?
I thought, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I did give careful thought to it. I tried to be very efficient. I tried to build on what he already knew. He'd been told that a small twin-engine prop plane crashed into one of the towers at the World Trade Center. So I tried to build on what he knew, be very efficient with my words, and then end with a statement that was unambiguous. America is under attack. So
we've heard earlier today from Mayor Madeline and other folks who were around, Ari Fleischer, who talked about, not that it wasn't an emotional time, but that sort of a workman-like, that they were surprised it wasn't more emotional. It was very much everybody had a job to do. Was that your remembrance of it as well?
Absolutely. In fact, I thought the president himself was extremely task-driven, and he was cool, calm, collected, and was ready to do the homework to make tough decisions. I tried to be cool, calm, and collected. I tried to make sure that the staff was not allowing emotions to get into the way of their responsibility to help the president meet an awesome responsibility, beyond comprehension, actually.
Was there a time then when it sort of the reality of it all dawned on you, not the technical reality, the logistical reality, but what this means?
I think the most searing image for me was the image we saw as we were leaving Offutt Air Force Base to come back to Washington, D.C. And you saw the images of the towers collapsing and the images before that of people jumping out of the World Trade Center. And it was just searing. So this day, I don't want people to remember me whispering in the president's ear. I want them never to forget the innocent victims and the first responders that answered the call to duty, and then they themselves became victims, and those heroes on that flight that prevented a lot of other Americans from dying, probably at the U.S. Capitol.
We talk a lot about how September 11th changed America and changed the world. Personally, did it change Andy Card?
Oh, yes. I mean, it did change me. It changed. I was much more serious about the obligations I had to be President's Chief of Staff. I never viewed the job the same way I did after September 11th as I did before it. Before, I was focused on the President's agenda. After September 11th, I was focused on what does the president need to do for America. It did change me, and obviously it changed all of our lives in the context of new bureaucracies. But think of the change immediately after the attack. America united. The world actually united with America. We were chanting USA, USA, USA. We were also paranoid. We saw enemies in our neighbors. So we had conflicting feelings of unity and suspicion. And that was a hard thing to overcome, both the unity and the suspicion. And so relatively quickly, we got back into the partisan divides and the philosophical debates that make democracy so exciting. And I missed the unity. We're still a little bit more paranoid than I think we need to be.
Certainly in New York, it was this remarkable time after the day after September 11th, and even on that day of unity. I remember going by a firehouse and just people gathering there just to kind of, they wanted to do something, just show solidarity, you know, with firefighters.
I was struck when the president visited this site on September 14th, 2001, and the crowd was chanting USA, USA. I looked over and I saw some rescue workers chanting USA, USA, and they had Japanese flags on their uniform. And then there were a team of search and rescue dogs, and the handlers were chanting USA, USA, and they had Canadian flags on their uniform.
It's interesting you said a moment ago, though, you feel like we're maybe still more paranoid than we need to be. I don't want to put it, that was the word, but...
Well, I think we still look very skeptically at our neighbors inside the United States because we were told to be vigilant, and we are vigilant. And remember, a lot of the attacks that have been thwarted were thwarted by the vigilance of American citizens. Someone on a plane saying, "What are you trying to..."
Say something sort of makes you suspicious of your neighbor,
Why are you lighting your shoe on fire? You know,
right.
You know, what's that van doing in front of a stand in New York City?
So how do you walk that line between vigilance and yet not unwarranted suspicion?
I think you, first of all, don't live in fear. Live with respect. Respect all of your fellow citizens while you may have a question. So I guess it's a fine difference between being paranoid. In the Washington, D.C. area, we were particularly paranoid, as was New York, over anthrax 3 weeks after the attack on September 11th. And then in Washington, D.C., we had the so-called white van sniper. So those were the particularly paranoid times in the community that I was living in around Washington, D.C. after September 11th. And I was glad that that kind of paranoia disappeared. We now let our kids go to the soccer field to play soccer.
You were with former President Bush last night, I know, down here.
I was
down here and then saw him.
I saw him last night and watched his speech on...
And what can you tell us about how he viewed these days?
Well, I honestly believe these days are not about him and that he doesn't think they're about him. He was trying to focus on the real heroes and the real victims. And the real heroes were the men and women that were on that flight that ended up crashing into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And the real victims and heroes were the ones who were at this site and at the Pentagon who said, "I just showed up for work," or "I answered the call to duty and was willing to give my life for it."
Andy Card, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Good to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Actor Tom Hanks narrates a 9/11 story that you probably never, ever heard before. Did you know that 9/11, on that day, we witnessed the largest sea evacuation in history, very close to where we are right now?
Boats, usually an afterthought in most New Yorkers' minds, were for the first time in over a century the only way in or out of Lower Manhattan.
Is in Los Angeles with us. Frank, what can you tell us about what's going on there?
Aaron, we just saw what appeared to be the worst possible situation. The last thing that we want to show you, in fact, people arriving here at the airport, apparently friends or family members of some of the...
That was our coverage at this time, exactly 10 years ago. Although a decade has passed, we are still hearing news stories about the events of September 11, 2001. A lot of you probably didn't realize that the largest sea evacuation in history took place on September 11, 2001, right here in New York. Watch now as Tom Hanks narrates the world broadcast premiere of that story, Boat Lift. It was produced and directed by Eddie Rosenstein for the Center for National Policy.
I thought I was watching a movie, Towering Inferno at first. And then I looked real close, and I noticed it was the World Trade Center. I was compelled, because I'm a type of person that can't stand by and watch other people suffer. And to me, they were suffering. They wanted to get off the island. and there was no way for them to get off the island other than the water. And I had noticed when I was watching the television, I saw a lot of, the ferries going up into the slips and taking people off. I said, fine, we could do the same thing. I could take people on my boat, get in there, take them where they have to go. And that's what we did.
On the morning of September 11th, when the towers came down, millions of people ran for safety. Hundreds of thousands of them ran south to the water's edge. That's when they realized that Manhattan is indeed an island and that they were trapped.
They were feeling helpless, and that's the worst feeling in the world. What was a person on the ground going to do? Buildings were down. There were people laying under the rubble of the building. Firemen, civilians. My wife was there, and I turned around. I says, I've got to go do something. Just like that. And she looked at me. She says, what are you going to do, you maniac? I says, I'm going to take the amberjack up into the city and help. She says, but what if they're attacked again? I says, well, then that's something I have to live with. I says, I have to do what I have to do. I says, and nobody can stop me right now. Even if I save one person or I rescue one person, that's one person less that will suffer and die.
Trying to evacuate Manhattan because nobody knew what was going on. You didn't know if something else was going to happen. It was just, a madness on one side and wanting to help people on the other side.
They were just streaming out of the buildings, and the first mode of transportation they saw was a ferry boat. That's when they knew, this is how I'm getting out of here. So they didn't even care where the boat was going.
There wasn't panic in New York in the beginning, just volume. It wasn't until the first building fell that there was panic.
You heard the building go down, but we're in the slip, so we can't see it. That's when we started letting go, and then all of a sudden, engulfed. You couldn't see anything.
People were actually jumping into the river and swimming out of Manhattan. Boats were very nearly running them over.
These people wanted out of Manhattan no matter any way they could.
Somebody wants you to go over there.
Every mode of transportation out of Manhattan was shut down. All the subways were shut. The tunnels were all closed. They closed the bridges. They closed everything immediately.
Boats, usually an afterthought in most New Yorkers' minds, were for the first time in over a century the only way in or out of Lower Manhattan.
The process actually had already started. There were some boats that were grabbing people, that people were lined up at the walls.
On the left, on the left, on the left.
It's just human nature. You see people in distress on the seawall in Manhattan begging you to pick them up. You have to pick them up.
They didn't know what was going on. They seen the building getting hit with these two planes. As far as they was concerned, we were being bombed. I was wondering if they were going to come on the boat, if they had people with bombs, or if they were going to come on. We're a big orange target in the middle of that harbor. My job is to keep the boat safe, my passengers safe, my crew safe.
Everybody was in shock, running around. They didn't want to leave their families. They had loved ones running around the city.
Anybody has a baby? Nobody has it.
There was one guy ran from the apron and jumped onto the boat. He grabbed onto the metal, climbed up right next to the pilot. So I'm going out there to say something. He slides down to the next deck. So the deckhands get him and go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm jumping for my life. So, you couldn't argue with him there.
There was a small boat that was at the lower tip of Manhattan. I thought the boat was going to flip over because so many people were trying to get on. And as I looked behind, 9. They were just 10 deep. And that's kind of what gave us the idea.
We decided that this has to get better organized and we better do it, and that's what we did.
So we decided to make the call on the radio. All available boats. This is the United States Coast Guard aboard the pilot boat in New York. Anyone want to help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan? Report to Governor's Island. Report to Governor's Island.
When that call came on the radio, they were coming.
I was uncertain of who was going to respond. About 15, 20 minutes later, there are just boats all across the horizon.
Literally 100 targets converging on the lower part of Manhattan.
When we came out of that dust cloud, tugboats, I've never seen so many tugboats all at once.
There was just like a fleet of tugboats headed to Manhattan.
If it floated and it could get there, it got there.
All different size, shapes, and form. I mean, and they were zooming across this border.
Ferries, private boats, party boats.
I worked on the water for 28 years. I've never seen that many boats come together at one time that fast. One radio call and it just came together just that fast.
Hundreds of boats converged on the city, leaving the sun-bathed harbor behind them. Dead ahead, the unknown.
That was something I won't forget. It was just low, dark, acrid, black smoke. It's like there was a big chimney in Manhattan. When we pulled into Pier 11, the dust was unbelievable.
And then out of nowhere, you just kept on seeing people coming.
They looked like zombies coming through the fog, and you knew that those were human beings.
Don't leave us. Please don't leave us here. Take us. At that point, the Coast Guard said, not how many people are you allowed, how many people can you fit?
Come on, guys. Anybody coming? Get your ass over here now. Now. Come on.
Boats started hanging, literally would take a bedsheet off a bunk and then a can of spray paint and paint their destination on.
Some of these people never been in the water, never been on a boat before.
Housewives, workers that do windows. We had executives. And the thing that was the best, everyone helped everyone.
I want you to hold my hand. Come on board. Get inside. One at a time. Get inside.
I saw 4 businessmen lifting up an old woman with a seeing eye dog, a German Shepherd, and they lifted her up like a surfboard and passed her over the handrails.
When we would carry a load of people over, and there was somebody standing there that seen her husband or wife, you know, that made us feel even better, you know. Well, at least we got 2 back together, you know. Just keep on going, you know.
The guy that works at the ferry, he's a welder. His son was on my boat. He actually came up. He thanked me.
We went back and forth all day long, carrying boatloads, as many as our boat would hold. And it's a lot of people. A lot of people.
You couldn't have planned nothing to happen that fast, that quick.
No training. This was just people doing what they had to do that day.
You forget all about what you're supposed to do, what they teach you in school, and you say, you know what? Morally, this is the right way to go, and deep down, this is what I'm gonna do.
Average people, they stepped up, and when they needed to, they showed me, you know, when the American people need to come together and pull together, they will do it.
I do feel a way honored that I was a part of it.
That was the greatest thing I ever did with my life.
The greatest day that I've ever seen in all my boating, I mean, my life on the water.
The great boat lift of 9/11 became the largest sea evacuation in history. Larger than the evacuation of Dunkirk in World War II, where 339,000 British and French soldiers were rescued over the course of 9 days. On 9/11, nearly 500,000 civilians were rescued from Manhattan by boat. It took less than 9 hours.
I believe somebody has a little hero in them. You gotta look in. And it's in there. It'll come out. It need to be.
I have one theory in life. I never want to say the word I should have. If I do it and I fail, I tried. If I do it and I succeed, better for me. And I tell my children the same thing. Never go through life saying you should have. If you want to do something, you do it.
For more on this story and others like it, you can go to roadtoresilience.com. Remarkable story. It is, and I mean, something we've seen all around the world in the wake of disasters and in conflict of strangers reaching out and literally saving the lives of others, and to know that, you know, that happened here 10 years ago today is just, it's an extraordinary feeling.
And we kind of, I mean, there was so much going on that day. That's why I love the Astra story that Drew Griffin is doing, this story, just things that now sort of give us a more and more complete picture of what went on.
In the decade since 9/11, a tattered flag found here after the collapse of the World Trade Center towers has been repaired by people who've lived through other disasters. That flag is in Joplin, Missouri today. We're going to take you there next. Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the memorial ceremonies at the World Trade Center site here, the World Trade Center Memorial. You can see World Trade Center, the number 1 World Trade Center, the tower, which is still being built. Hundreds of family members just spending time around the 2 reflecting pools in the footprints of the Twin Towers, where the towers once stood. Now these enormous, extraordinarily beautiful fountains, each some 200 feet. Each side 200 feet with a plunging water that actually sort of 2 levels of waterfall, a center square in the middle that also has water pouring into it.
It's beautiful. It really is hard to describe, and it's even hard to take a picture of it and do it any kind of justice, I think. But it's going
to be open to the public starting tomorrow. Today was the first time it's open to family members and family members only who are still here. Several hundred of them are still waiting on the outskirts. Probably about 100 or so are listening to the names of the fallen being read. Those names have been read since early this morning, and the readings continue probably for another half hour to 45 minutes or so. But most of the family members now are inside the memorial park and walking around these fountains.
And sort of overshadowing this day, as I guess, from here forth may always be the case, is current security threats. We know from some of the stuff that was taken out of Osama bin Laden's home in Pakistan that they were obsessed about 9/11, that anniversaries are a big time to make a big splash. I want to welcome Fran Townsend, our Homeland Security expert here, was former Homeland Security advisor to George W. Bush. How do you I was watching the traffic yesterday in New York, and, they squeezed it down to 1 lane so they could check all the trucks and some of the cars, and it was just complete chaos in New York City, which will surprise people who think New York City is always in complete chaos. And I wondered at the time, as we were sitting there, how and when the decision is made to say to the public, and take what are pretty extreme measures to disrupt a big city in the middle of rush hour.
Well, part of it, Candy, is do you think that you can get an investigation and get more information yourself? But there was a time constraint here, remember. This became public about 48 hours before because of how late they got this information, how soon it became available to them. And so they had the time constraint. They wanted the help of the American people if they had information. And then, third, what you hope is when the bad guys hear that you're aware of the plot, it's sort of what I call a brush bat pitch. Maybe they'll decide not to launch something they had otherwise been planning because they know about the police presence. I mean, after all, we now know that there were 2 or 3 stolen trucks that they were searching for, hence all of the searching on the George Washington Bridge and in tunnels. And they seem to have done an extraordinary job. They've even, we've heard some threats of lone wolves. But even that, you know, they have license plate readers, they have leads to look for those people, and none of that has disrupted this very important memorial.
Days ago, 2 days ago, I guess, when this story broke, this terror threat, there were reports that one of them could be a U.S. citizen, then it was said to be two, who may have been along the Pakistan border, may have tried to fight in Afghanistan. If an American is going to Afghanistan or going to Pakistan, how quickly would they show up on the U.S. radar? I mean, if a U.S. citizen suddenly decides to take off to Pakistan and disappears for a long period of time, then returns to the United States, I would think that would automatically raise some red flags.
It does, Anderson. Your instincts are exactly right. I mean, there are a myriad of ways in the intelligence community that you track worldwide suspicious travel and travel patterns. So don't think you'll only come up on the radar if you go directly to someplace like Pakistan. Right. There are other ways, by using formulas in the intelligence community, that you can identify people with suspicious patterns of travel.
Believe it, my passport is always gleaned over very carefully when I ever come back.
He looks very suspicious.
I always show press ID to preempt any questions. So.
Exactly. There was always a phenomenon, I know, when murders took place, when I did a lot of local TV, and it was always about copycats. So when you say you're hoping to brush back would-be terrorists by sort of making it public, do you also worry about the other way?
Yes, you do. You worry about other people who are looking to get
that's a great idea.
Ooh, look, I'll have my 15 minutes of fame. You do worry about that. But that's why you've seen the perimeter here. The inner perimeter is very tight. And even I walked from Canal and Chambers, right, to get in here. I mean, we walked blocks and we had Office of Emergency Management passes. And so that's exactly why the copycats are why you push the perimeter so far out.
Fran Townsend, our CNN Homeland Security Advisor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Today we are seeing ugly reminders that global terrorism does remain a threat. In Sweden, a SWAT team backed by local police arrested 4 people overnight on suspicion of plotting terror attacks. A top security analyst tells CNN, quote, "We have been able to prevent a situation." In Afghanistan this weekend, 2 civilians died and 77 NATO personnel, mostly U.S. troops, were hurt when militants detonated a truck bomb at a NATO base. Across the United States, especially here in New York and in Washington, there's very heavy security, as you just heard, because of the government's warning of specific and credible yet unconfirmed information about a possible plot. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden was director of the National Security Agency on 9/11.
I would say it's probably stronger as a threat in terms of its ability to inspire rather than its ability to organize.
And that gets us to lone wolves.
Right.
Is that the biggest? I mean, this was an amazing number of people,
right,
very coordinated, the 9/11 attacks. But since then, it's been people whose ties, certainly philosophically, if you want to call it that, were evident, but whose organizational ties were not, right, the attempts.
Right. And as a measure of our success, we've made it far less likely that they're going to conduct the kind of attack they want to conduct. Complex, well-organized, mass casualty against an iconic target. Never say never, but their ability to do that is very much reduced. And so now we're faced with this Al-Qaeda-inspired, the lone wolf, the individual, the self-radicalized. That's far more difficult for us to detect and stop, and we are going to have to shift our weight in the American and allied intelligence communities to be better able to detect that kind of threat.
Let me just get some personal reflections from you. At what moment on 9/11, normal day, you drive to work, but it was early, it was, at the beginning of the day, what moment did you think Al-Qaeda did this?
Second plane into the tower. I was holding a normal meeting, as you suggest. Plane hits World Trade Center like most of us. Horrible accident, probably believing it was a sport plane or a small aircraft. When the second plane hit the tower, it removed all doubt for me, and frankly, I think for all people like me in the intelligence community, this had to be an attack, and we all immediately went to, this is the work of Al-Qaeda. About mid-morning that day, George called me, George Tenet, said, Mike, what do you got? I said, George, it's Al-Qaeda. We can already hear the celebratory phone calls in the network.
And were you in a room full of people that you were watching this on television?
No, I wasn't on my screen. I was having a meeting. My executive assistant came in, told me. When the second plane hit, when I got word of that, I simply turned to my EA, my executive assistant, and said, get the head of security in here. And as a few minutes later, he comes walking into my office. My executive assistant is coming in the other door, and she's saying, there are reports of explosions on the mall. That turned out to be the Pentagon aircraft. And I didn't even allow my security chief to say anything. I said, all non-essential personnel evacuate immediately.
There had to have been a time when you saw what was happening. You saw these people jumping from buildings, these parts of planes in the Pentagon, when you thought, did we miss something? Did we miss something? How could we miss something this big? Did you have a moment of self-doubt in any of that?
Sure. I mean, we all did. And in one sense, you know, we were responsible for stopping this kind of an event. I've reflected on it, Candy, and let me share with you how I've kind of summarized it in my own mind. 9/11 was both preventable and inevitable. Preventable in one or another specific. If we'd have done this, if we'd have done that, we may have disrupted this plot. But it was inevitable in the sense that if the United States did not conceive itself as a nation being at war with Al-Qaeda and taking the necessary steps because we were belligerent, because we didn't self-identify into that category, this was going to happen sooner or later.
Was there also a moment when you sat either by yourself or with somebody in your family and thought, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, look at what's happened?
Evening of September 11th, I told you we had non-essential personnel leave the building. We tried to move all the other personnel into a 3-story building and out of the high-rises for reasons that were obvious then. One shop we couldn't move was our counterterrorism shop. It was still in one of the high-rises and actually near the top floor. As we're getting to dusk, I decided I needed to go over there and talk to those folks because they had both a professional and personal impact with which they had to deal that day. A lot of these folks were Arab Americans. And so I walked into the shop, and you know, it was just kind of a presencing. There wasn't any speech to be given. Just kind of walked through, a hand on the shoulder, because they were really busy. They were working very hard. And I looked up, and as I was there, as I said, it was dusk. I saw our logistics force putting up blackout curtains on those windows. And I had the thought, we're putting up blackout curtains in Eastern Maryland. This is going to be different.
Was there ever a point when you cried?
Woke up in the middle of the night at some point the first week after 9/11 and was sobbing.
And finally, what scares you now for this country?
In terms of this topic, it's the one-off, it's the lone wolf. That's the real danger. And let me add on to that. This might be a bit surprising. It's not just the attack, which obviously is going to be bad enough. And you notice I didn't use any conditional voice there. I said it's going to happen. We need to be careful about our response. We've got these guys in a bad place. They aren't capable of doing a lot of things they want to do. We have to be careful when the next attack takes place that we don't give them that which they're incapable of achieving themselves. In other words, that we don't take what at best would be a tactical success for them, and by our response, turn it into some sort of strategic defeat for us.
Michael Hayden, a decade after the 9/11 attacks, hundreds of firefighters and rescue workers who breathed that toxic dust and the noxious fumes amid the wreckage of the World Trade Center are having health problems. Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, has been looking at what was in that dust and what's ahead for the people who breathed it. Sanjay joins us now. Obviously, we've seen new reports just in the last few months by The Lancet about cancer, in elevated levels of cancer in firefighters in New York.
That's right, and I think the way this has progressed over the last 10 years has been interesting. I mean, I think people who breathed in that dust and smelled all that acrid air knew that it probably wasn't good for them. There was anecdotal cases of it making people sick. Then there was more evidence about it causing respiratory problems specifically. The cancer question has always been pretty elusive, and it does remain that to some extent, although this new study showed that there was a relationship between the dust and cancer. Exactly how significant is a bit in dispute depending on who you ask, but that it's possible that this dust that we have over here, you've seen it, could potentially be causing cancer, seems to be proven out by the study. Now it's just a question of how many people are affected and how significant are those numbers.
So when you think about it, and I know you know what's in this dust, I mean, you have to, so there's concrete particles or whatever that make the dust, and then it captures bacteria and the fuel, the jet fuel, and I mean, what's in it?
Well, you know, the way that it was explained to me, just about everything in the periodic table in some ways is in this dust. When the planes, the jet fuel collided with these buildings, you had sort of these throwing together of all these various chemicals. So benzene and titanium, things that you normally wouldn't see together, suddenly forced together under very hot temperatures, and then sort of collecting in the air and attaching itself to this dust, which is why it stayed in the air for so long. And then it slowly drifted down. People breathed it in. You could smell it. There was something different about it. Firefighters said to me this was unlike anything they'd ever smelled before, and they obviously, are in these types of situations all the time. And this isn't even all of it, Candy, because there were volatile gases as well that people breathed in for a couple of days, but then those subsequently evaporated. This was collected, this was analyzed, it's been studied over the last several years, and it's part of what people are using now to draw some of these conclusions.
So it was, first there's just the dust and inhaling that much, but it's really what attached itself to it.
I think more so, yeah. We looked at some of this dust under what are called electron microscopes, really detailed images. It's jagged dust with all these various chemicals attached to it. That was what, these were like, dust was like a carrier or a vehicle for all these chemicals into the body.
It's extraordinary. And how much, where is the dust now?
Well, it's really interesting. There was a few people who decided to collect it at the time. I think they had the foresight to sort of recognize that this is toxic stuff. We should collect it, analyze it. Rutgers University is one of the places that has stored, several pounds of it. It's in a cold room. It has to be stored under specific conditions. This is dust that they've given to us for the documentary that we're working on. But they keep a lot of it under specific conditions to analyze again if any new evidence or new techniques of studying it should ever come out. But again, that particular study about the fire department and this dust was, based on looking at the dust and then looking at these firefighters and recognizing there was an increased risk of cancer.
Sanjay Gupta, thank you.
Thank you.
You're looking at President Obama talking to family members. Less than a month after 9/11, U.S. and British forces were at war with Afghanistan's Taliban and hunting down Al-Qaeda terrorists. But 10 years later, would you believe some Afghans know nothing about 9/11 and its connection to their country? We'll show you next.
Everything south of the Brooklyn Bridge is everything. People all over the streets. Travel is near impossible. 5 on 3. Frequency oxygen for the fire this day. You need the oxygen. Okay, let me tell you this. We're also lost American 77.
American 77. American we're looking for person ahead here.
The White House is being evacuated.
Years ago today, everyone remembers basically where they were. If they were alive, they certainly have a vivid memory looking at these live pictures from here at the Pentagon. I'm Wolf Blitzer. We're reporting from the Pentagon. The memorial service now over with the President, though, of the United States, getting ready to come here with the First Lady to lay a wreath at the Pentagon, remembering those Americans who died here aboard that American Airlines flight, as well as who were inside the Pentagon. Now, I had a chance earlier in the week to sit down with the former Vice President Dick Cheney, and he reflected, together with me, on lessons learned from 9/11. Could it have been prevented? What was going through his mind? Did you ever think your life was endangered?
No.
Did you think your family's life was endangered?
No.
Did you ever say to yourself, I wish I would have done something that could have prevented these hijackers from committing this atrocity?
Such as?
When the summer of 2001, when you got a report, the Presidential Daily Brief, saying Al-Qaeda was planning on launching attacks in the United States. Did you take any specific action after you got that report?
Well, you need to go back and relook at all the commissions that studied all of this material.
They've all reported
the fact of the matter was that we did not receive any actionable intelligence prior to 9/11.
But you remember that Presidential Daily Brief?
There was one brief, but it did not give us any information or intelligence of sufficient validity that we could mount an operation.
I mean, everybody's smarter with hindsight, obviously.
Of course.
But there was...
You're one of the best at that.
Believe me, trust me, I appreciate that. But at the time, when you got that brief saying Al-Qaeda is planning an attack on the United States, in the United States, did anyone say, maybe the CIA and the FBI should coordinate so that the left hand of the government could talk to the U.S. government, that there could be steps taken that might have prevented 9/11?
Well, my attitude on it has always been that we had a lot of good people out there working very hard. trying to track down the various elements in the terrorist community, if you will. There was a lot of reporting coming in. The very first report we received after we got elected, sworn in, talked, for example, about WMD in Iraq. There was constant reporting on Al-Qaeda, on terrorist threats. I talked about terrorists in an interview I did in April of 2001 before we ever got down there. But we never had a piece of actionable intelligence. It doesn't do just to say, well, there's going to be an attack in the United States. That doesn't tell you anything.
So you didn't do anything after you got that report?
I didn't say that. I think there was a lot of work done by the intelligence community that created the alert posture and alert system. If anybody had had intelligence that would have let us intercept or interfere with that attack, obviously we would have acted.
Because
we had no such intelligence.
Because some of the analysts, Richard Clark, who was the counterterrorism advisor at the White House, said, you know what, I presented this report and everybody basically ignored it.
Yeah, I don't agree with Mr. Clark. I don't think he provided that kind of thing. I think that's after the fact thinking on his part.
The former Vice President Dick Cheney speaking with me last week about stuff that might have occurred if the U.S. would have taken action after that presidential daily brief. Anderson, Kendi, I know you remember all those events. I know all of us have gone through the 9/11 commissions, all the other articles and books, studies that have been done on if 9/11 could have prevented. On this day, though, we remember those who perished. There's 3,000 people who died on 9/11. There'll be plenty of time to do some additional postmortems in the years to come. Guys, back to you.
And family members here continue to not only read out names, but spend a lot of time around the name of their loved one. Those names now etched in bronze, etched and placed near other friends they had from work or other family members who might have died alongside them. But the names sort of etched by association at the request of individual family members.
So basically what this means is, and I think what's interesting here is we talked earlier about people taking a piece of paper and then doing a rubbing along so that the imprint of their loved one's name comes up, and they're doing it on the programs for today. And earlier we spoke with one of those who lost her husband, and this really is the only resting place at this moment that 1,100, the families of 1,100 victims have, because there are still unidentified.
Many people did not have remains
with no
to bury.
remains, a lot more than 1,100.
And some may have a tombstone, but they feel that this is the place where their loved one is.
They are.
Yeah.
Or this, and that's why in some respects it took 10 years, because it was that because you in the broader shot of what we're seeing, here are the memorials. These are on the footprints of Tower 1, the South Tower and the North Tower. But as you broaden out that picture, what you see is commerce. What you see are buildings that are being built or will be built or have been built to house businesses. And they tried to find the sweet spot between this, what many of these relatives consider, many Americans consider to be hallowed ground, and not just that commerce is a part of America, but the need for commerce in Manhattan.
Right. There's a leaseholder for this space, the man who had had the Twin Towers, Larry Silverstein, who wanted office space. About half of the site has been devoted to the memorial, which is what is open now to the family members, which tomorrow opens up to the public. The rest are commercial sites. Also, a new subway station has been built, and the buildings are going up all around us. The construction is literally happening around the clock. 9/11 is certainly one of those rare events where most people can remember exactly where they were when they first saw it. So perhaps we take it for granted that everybody knows what it is or would at least recognize it. But is that really the case, especially in some of the places that have been most affected by its consequences? Journalist Adam Peltz traveled in Afghanistan, showing pictures to the unbelievers and getting their reaction.
Helmand in southern Afghanistan is the province that has borne the brunt of the fighting between the Taliban and coalition forces. While on patrol with the Marines, I get a first opportunity to ask a couple of young Afghan men what they know about 9/11.
Yeah. No, they never heard about this.
Yeah? Can you show them a few more? And can you ask them, do they know where it is even?
We don't know, so that's because we're a farmer. We never heard about anything else about the world.
Big time motorcycle coming through.
The two young men had clearly never heard of 9/11. But maybe the elders at a local shul would have more to say.
Yeah. No, they didn't see it. They're saying I think you just can see the smoke from the buildings, and that's it. When you guys show us this picture, that guy saying it's, I think that was a Kabul.
If I had just gotten here, I would have been surprised, but having been here now for 6 months, I'm not. This is pretty much the Stone Age is where we are.
And what did you think about their reactions?
Oh, I thought it was fascinating. The guy who said it was Kabul was clearly had never been to Kabul. It just shows you how isolated they are, even in their own country.
They're saying the Americans saying, we're going to help you. They destroy one building and they destroy us how many buildings? And they say, we're going to help you. Where is the help?
I do sympathize or understand what some of them were saying is, yeah, your buildings were knocked down, but how many of our buildings have been knocked down?
Amazingly, in a country where for 10 years a war has been fought with 9/11 as its root cause and justification, it turns out not only were the villagers oblivious to 9/11, but so were the Afghan police, and even some of the translators working with the US military.
But you don't know the history of this event?
No, I have no idea about the story of this.
Have you ever seen these pictures before?
No, I didn't.
In fact, after showing the images to dozens of Afghans, I only found one person who clearly recognized them and could connect them to the US's initial reason for coming to Afghanistan, and that was the police district chief in Marja.
He says that the Taliban, the terrorists, they attacked to the building of New York and they killed most of the people. They destroyed this building. So that was the reason American force today came in Afghanistan.
An interesting look at how many people in Afghanistan, at least in Helmand province and in the southern part of Afghanistan, where so much of the U.S. effort is now concentrated, how much they actually know about 9/11, what occurred here, and clearly not many seem to. Fareed Zakaria, GPS, would normally be coming on at this hour. We are going to push that back. The reading of the names continues. The memorials continue here at the World Trade site, so we're going to stay here, continue to bring you live coverage of that. A little bit ago, we met a man whose group is custodian of the 9/11, the national 9/11 flag, which was damaged here at the World Trade Center site on that day. The group helps people in disaster-stricken communities across the United States. Excuse me. In return, those people help to stitch the flag back together. Our Jim Spellman is with some people who survived the Joplin, Missouri tornado last May. It's their turn to help with the World Trade Center flag. He joins us now. Jim?
Hey, Anderson. Yeah, take a look at this flag. It's really remarkable up close. As you mentioned, it hung at Ground Zero, where it was heavily damaged. The white spots were turned gray. It had rips and tears. All this year, Jeff Parness and his group, New York Says Thank You, have been going around the country repairing it spot by spot with these flags that have flown often over other disaster sites and things like that. Some of it's really remarkable. Take a look at this one. This portion of the flag flew over Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. This section right here, this flew at Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. That was the Georgia patch. You can see on the far side there's active duty military people. They're showing a part of the flag that flew over the Pentagon on September 11th. And you know, this really, the spirit here, nobody here is talking about terrorists or war or anything. Everybody here is talking about the day after September 11th, when we saw so much unity and so much bravery by first responders. And that's really the spirit. I think that what they want to do is reclaim that from history and be able to have that be as much a part of the story as terrorists or war or anything along those lines, Anderson.
Jim, I appreciate that. You know, it was one of the things we were talking about before is I do think on this day and in the years ahead, it's not the names of the terrorists that Americans remember, nor necessarily are they important. They have disappeared in history and will. It's the victims here whose names should be remembered, and the names, obviously, of the victims etched in bronze here. There's been another memorial observance going on further uptown in New York. CNN special correspondent at the Firemen's Memorial in New York. It's about 7 miles north of the World Trade Center site. We'll take you there next. Soledad O'Brien joins us now. Soledad, what is the scene? Is the memorial still going on there?
You know, it's interesting. The memorial itself has wrapped up, but what we have here are firefighters who have driven in many cases, on their motorcycles to be part of the celebration here. It's really remarkable. They did this real convoy of motorcycles right down Riverside Drive. You're right, Anderson, about 8 miles north of where you are at 100th Street and at Riverside Drive. So after the memorial ended and many of the firefighters from the FDNY went off to church, folks from, every state, literally every single state, plus I've seen firefighters from Germany and firefighters from France and Canada and Australia are here and taking an opportunity to check out the Firefighters Memorial, which is really the centerpiece of the event that was here today. It was remarkable. We wanted to tell the story today of a woman named Regina Wilson. She's a firefighter whose story we tell in a documentary that we have airing tonight at 10 p.m. on CNN. We wanted to look at the role of women at Ground Zero who served, and as part of our documentary, we told the story of Regina Wilson. Take a look.
My name is Regina Wilson, and I am a firefighter for the City of New York. Who here knows what a firefighter does?
These Manhattan kindergartners are too young to have witnessed the terror or the heroism of 9/11.
If you want to do anything at all, you can do it.
Regina's challenge is convincing these girls that the value of serving is greater than the danger.
These are all women. They're holding, see this hose line here?
Brenda Berkman fought for that right in 1979 when she sued the fire department for gender discrimination.
Regina, ready to go?
Ready.
All right, let's get that over the edge.
12 years ago, Regina joined Engine 219 in Brooklyn, a beneficiary of Brenda's lawsuit.
Sir, can you please put your arms around my neck?
She became the first firefighter in her family. This is not an easy job,
right?
And it's a scary job, and it's a job where you could die on the job.
Right.
Why is this something that you fought to be part of?
Because I think it's a cause worthy of that. Everyone needs somebody to look out for them. And I think like the purest part of my job is when I'm in uniform, because you can't tell my race, you can't tell my gender.
Regina hopes more women will follow her into firefighting. Yet 10 years after 9/11, the fire department has fewer female firefighters. How many female firefighters are there in the city?
29, and there's a little close to 11,000.
29 out of 11,000.
Yeah, so we're not even a percentage. Hi, I'm Regina.
The fire department recently launched a recruiting drive. Regina is always looking for new female firefighters.
I always feel like I'm doing something for my community.
Regina has now left her fire station temporarily because she's focusing full-time on recruiting, because only every 4 years do they give the firefighters test. She wants to make sure that her face is out there so many other women will see her face and realize that firefighting is a great job for women as well. Anderson?
How tough is it for a woman to join the New York City Fire Department? I mean, is it the same test that male firefighters have to go through?
It is, and it's interesting when you talk to Regina and see her workout regime, because she said, many people just think the job is physical, and it is, but it's physical, and a woman who's strong can do it, and she's a strong woman, and so we follow her around through her workouts and see that she is able to do exactly what everyone else is able to do. What's also interesting, I think, is the changes over the last 10 years that have really come about in the fire department, which is there's much more, emphasis placed on book learning. Keep in mind the massive amount of experience that was lost when 343 firefighters lost their lives on 9/11. That was tons of experience. So the idea of learning on the job, which was the way things were done, 10 years ago and before that, that's really changed. The focus has changed. There's not the people, we were told, that really could do that across the board in all the fire stations. So now they focus much more on training people before they go out and start the job. It's not learning on the job. Things have really changed a lot to a large degree in firehouses across New York City.
Hey, Soledad, is there a theory as to why there are so few women? I'm assuming there are also fewer women who apply percentage-wise than men.
They believe it's completely about recruitment, and especially here in New York, where firefighting is a job that is often passed down from father to son, father to son. They really want to get more women's faces out there so women can see that women are doing the job. But you know, there's some cities like San Francisco and the city Miami-Dade, for example, that have as high as 15% of the firefighting force is female. So they believe those numbers are changeable. It's just going to be a matter of really aggressively recruiting women for what is a terrific job. That noise, by the way, over my shoulder, at the memorial here at 100th Street in Riverside is a number of speeches now and people making presentations, and what it really literally is one of the most beautiful memorials in New York City, the Firefighters Memorial, which was placed there in 1913, and in the last 10 years it's where firefighters have come to pay their respects to the 343 firefighters who died. I hope that you'll have a chance to watch our documentary tonight. It airs at 10 p.m. Eastern. It's called Beyond Bravery, the Women at Ground Zero.
Soledad, thanks.
Thanks, Soledad. We also want to remind our viewers, Fareed Zakaria GPS is still to come in its entirety when we wrap up our coverage here. Just ahead, canine search and rescue dogs were a common sight here 10 years ago, sniffing through the wreckage of the World Trade Center on September 11th. Next up, a memorial commemorating their contributions. Looking at pictures of the President of the United States and, of course, First Lady Michelle Obama. They are in Shanksville at the memorial there, and talk about your pastoral scene. I mean, it gives you a sense of how far away. We had two cities attacked, and then this plane where there was that horrendous fight in the cockpit that went down in rural Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
President Obama and Michelle Obama were here at the World Trade site earlier this morning, along with former President Bush and his wife Laura and their daughters. He will also then go on to the Pentagon, along with the First Lady Michelle Obama, for a commemoration ceremony there. The survivors of the 9/11 terror attacks tell remarkable stories about finding their way to safety. Michael Hinkson was inside the World Trade Center, but never saw anything because he's blind, and got out with the help of his guide dog. He told the story to CNN's Alina Cho.
The images are seared in our collective memory. For Michael Hinkson, 9/11 was not about what he saw, but what he heard.
Stay where you are, man!
Blind since birth, Hinkson was working on the 78th floor of the North Tower when 18 floors above him, the first plane struck.
When did you first realize that something was wrong?
Instantly, because what happened was that we heard a muffled explosion, the building shuddered, and then if you imagine my arm as the tower, it just started tipping. And it kept tipping and tipping and tipping. We moved about 20 feet.
He knew he had to get out. He also knew he needed help. So he turned to his lifeline, guide dog Roselle, his constant companion for 12 years.
I took her leash, I told her to heel, which meant come on my left side and sit, which she did, and about that time the building dropped straight down about 6 feet.
With time running out, Hinkson made his way to Stairwell B and began his descent.
1,463 steps.
At least that's what I calculate. I don't count stairs, but it gave me something to do going down. I knew that there were 19 stairs between floors. So later, 77 flights, I calculated 1,463.
Along the way, a critical clue, a familiar odor.
It wasn't something that I expected to encounter in the World Trade Center. And finally, I realized that's what I smell when I go to an airport.
Jet fuel.
So we assumed we were hit by an airplane, but we had no information.
Scared for his life, somehow he remained calm, so Roselle wouldn't panic.
If I started acting nervous, if I started sounding fearful, that would have made Roselle nervous. She depends on me to be focused. Her job is to make sure we walk safely, not to know where I want to go. So I have to give her commands. The more confident I am, the more comfortable she is.
His calm helped keep his co-workers focused, too.
David kept shouting, "We got to get out of here." And I said, "Slow down. We're going to evacuate in an orderly way." You got the picture, right? The sighted guy is seeing all this stuff going on, and the blind guy, who can't see anything, is saying, "We'll get out of here, but we're going to do it in an orderly way." At one point on the stairs, we all stopped because a woman near us stopped and said, "I can't go on. I can't breathe. We're not going to make it out of here." We stopped and had a group hug.
What haunts him the most, 10 years later, are memories of running into firemen who were headed up into the hell above.
He petted Roselle. She gave him some kisses, which was probably the last unconditional love he ever got in his life. And if he made it out, I've never heard it.
45 minutes after he began his escape, Hinkson finally made it to ground level. This is video his colleagues shot as they fled the North Tower. By late afternoon, he and Roselle found refuge at a friend's apartment.
Your story resonated with so many people around the world because of what people perceive to be the extraordinary nature of your escape. I don't sense that you feel it was any more extraordinary than anyone else's escape.
I think that it was a miracle that so many people got out, how so many people worked together in the face of so many odds, and working with Roselle was one example of teamwork.
Alina Cho, CNN, New York.
It was extraordinary that so many people were able to get out alive. Remember on that day we all worried about the numbers of potential casualties. They had body bags, 30,000, I think, body bags put aside. Thankfully, the numbers were not nearly that. There were many four-legged heroes in the aftermath of 9/11. Canine search and rescue dogs were a common sight sniffing through the wreckage of the World Trade Center. We have a lot of photographs of the dogs at work. The American Kennel Club sent canine teams to Ground Zero moments after the attacks. The dogs worked tirelessly over the coming days to help find and recover the victims. Many of those dogs are being honored today in New Jersey. The group Finding One Another is paying tribute to members of the canine search and rescue community, volunteers and professionals, canine and human, who served during the 9/11 disaster. Let's listen in to some of the reading of the names, the final reading of the names this morning here and this afternoon at the World Trade Center site.
Andrew Sturgiopoulos.
Peter Vega, and my late husband, James Patrick Ladley. We were blessed to have you in our life, Jimmy. We miss you and we will never forget you. Thank you for my two beautiful children. I honor your memory by keeping them close to heart, just like you.
Alan L. Wisniewski. And on my brother, Brian Christopher Novotny. May God bless you. God bless America.
Al-Qaeda may have lost its leader, Osama bin Laden, this year, 10 years after 9/11. But does Al-Qaeda still have a stronghold on terrorism? Earlier, I asked our terrorism analyst, Paul Cruikshank, about Al-Qaeda's ability to strike again. Here's what he told me.
There's still a threat today. There's evidence of some sort of plot, perhaps, coming from Pakistan, from Al-Qaeda over there. That information is not corroborated at this point, at this moment. but they still have a safe haven in Pakistan. There's still a lot of Western recruits going to the training camps in Pakistan, and that's giving them opportunities to recruit them, train them in bomb-making training, and send them back to the West for attacks. They still have a safe haven there. The drone strikes have been very damaging to the organization there. Bin Laden is now dead. Other senior operatives have been killed. But they've been able to promote fresh blood up through the ranks. They've been able to do things in the tribal areas of Pakistan, like train people indoors so that people aren't so exposed to these drone strikes. There's also a threat now from various affiliates around the world. The threat has grown more fragmented, more decentralized, more diffuse. There's a group in Yemen, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, that's the most immediate threat now to the United States, Frederica. Also, there's really this homegrown threat now, lone wolves, not linked to Al-Qaeda, but inspired by their ideology, that may launch attacks. Al-Qaeda is encouraging this at the moment, Frederica.
Paul Cruikshank telling me also that since Al-Qaeda has been so splintered and so decentralized, the terror threat is actually harder to pin down now than it was 10 years ago, he said. We'll have much more in the newsroom right after this.
My beautiful, amazing mother, Grace Allegricua. I love you and I miss you, and I hope you're so proud of all of us, and I know you're looking down, smiling upon us.
And my sister, Bridget Ann Esposito. You were a special angel, sent by God, loved by all, taken but not forgotten. You are forever in our hearts.
Decades since the 9/11 attacks, we've been in 2 major wars, including in Afghanistan. Next, why the NATO commander in Afghanistan thinks it's important to keep American forces there.
Dad, you're a grandfather now. My son is nearly 3 years old, and I will never let a day go by without him knowing that his grandfather is a hero. We love you. We miss you. Be safe.
And overnight, police in Sweden arrested 4 people believed to be plotting terror attacks. This is the coastal city of Gothenburg, Sweden's 2nd largest city after Stockholm. Swedish authorities say the suspects were in the preparation stage of an attack. No other details have been given. Police say they had probable cause to put the suspects in jail. And in Afghanistan, a suicide attacker set off a truck bomb at the entry gate to a coalition base. At least 2 Afghan civilians are dead and nearly 80 NATO personnel are hurt. The Taliban claims responsibility. Thousands of American troops are still in Afghanistan on this 10th anniversary of 9/11. The man who commands international forces there sat down for an exclusive interview with CNN's Suzanne Malveaux.
10 years from the September 11th attacks, why are we still here?
We're here because Afghanistan must be left as a sovereign nation, a member of the international community, governed by a democratic government that ultimately evinces human rights, dispenses the rule of law, and is not a platform for foreign terrorism, is not a platform ultimately to launch attacks on the United States ever again, on the West, and upon the thousands and thousands of innocent people who have suffered as a direct result of Al-Qaeda and Taliban's ideology.
Coalition forces invaded Afghanistan in October 2001. Americans mark a somber anniversary. Ceremonies are taking place across the country on this 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, the worst terror strikes ever on U.S. soil. In New York, events were centered at the new 9/11 memorial at Ground Zero.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
During the ceremony, the names of nearly 2,800 people who died in the World Trade Center attacks were read, and moments of silence were held at the exact times the towers were hit, and then again when they fell. Family members gathered at the memorial's stone walls to touch the names of their loved ones. And President Barack Obama and former President George W. Bush helped lead the commemoration there. In Arlington, Virginia, U.S. troops placed wreaths at the memorial for 9/11 victims at the Pentagon. The 184 people killed when the hijacked American Airlines jetliner struck the building are all in that memorial.
Was lost, but now
The military choir sang Amazing Grace as part of the events at the Pentagon. Vice President Joe Biden helped lead the ceremonies there earlier today. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a memorial service for the victims who died when United Airlines Flight 93 plunged to the ground there. They are believed to have prevented the hijackers from flying the plane into the U.S. Capitol in Washington. President Obama laid a wreath at the ceremony to honor the 40 victims on that flight. One of the highlights of the ceremony in Shanksville, a children's choir singing America the Beautiful. And we have reporters covering all angles of this day of remembrance. Poppy Harlow in New York, David Mattingly in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and Jessica Yellen at the White House. We begin with Poppy Harlow joining us live from the top of 2 World Financial Center in New York. Poppy.
Frederica, it's just been an amazing day here from when all of this began at 8 o'clock this morning. I want to share with you some sound that I think really paints the picture for people of what today was like. Of course, more than 2,600 American lives lost right here behind me 10 years ago today. There was a mix of sadness, a mix of hope. It was cathartic for some of the family members here today, thousands of them down here at what was Ground Zero and what is really now come to life with the memorial here behind me and the buildings being built. But first, I want you to take a listen to a young man named Peter Negron. He lost his father when he was just a little boy. He spoke at the ceremony here in 2003 on the anniversary, and then he spoke again today about what it would have been like to have his father with him. Apparently we don't have that sound for you, but I'll tell you what it was like because it really brought me to tears. He said, I would have wanted my father here to take me through my high school years, to teach me how to talk with a girl, to be there for 100 more moments that I would have liked to have. Also, what really stood out to me, Frederica, was Vice President Joe Biden speaking in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. He told the story of a widow, a wife that talked about the loss of her husband. Take a listen to what the Vice President had to say earlier today. Apparently, we don't have that sound from Vice President Biden. Take a listen to Peter Negron, the young man that I just told you about, remembering his father.
I wish my dad had been there to teach me how to drive, ask a girl out on a date, and see me graduate from high school. And 100 other things I can't even begin to name. He worked in an environmental department and cared about the earth and our future. I know he wanted to make a difference.
Firefighter singing. And Frederica, that was just one of the thousands of stories that we heard down here today with the families. And I want to let you know that after the ceremony, which was hours long, all of the names were read off. The family members were all let in for the first time here behind me to the World Trade Center Memorial. It is 2 beautiful, picturesque pools all around it. The names of all of the victims on 9/11 are written, etched in, and the family members for the first time got to go in and see their loved one's name written down there, Frederica.
Poppy Harlow, thank you so much. We're going to move south now from Ground Zero to Pennsylvania. A very somber scene there as well. Shanksville, that's where United Flight 93 crashed in a remote field, killing 40 passengers and crew members. A ceremony was also held there this morning at a memorial built at that crash site, and CNN's David Mattingly is there and joining us live now. David, we know the President and First Lady got a first-hand look at those pillars with the 40 names etched in that marble. What else has happened there today?
Well, Frederica, this is such a different site compared to New York and Washington, D.C. It's very pastoral here, very peaceful. The design of this memorial is intended for people to come here and reflect on the sacrifice of the men and women on board Flight 93. And today, the feelings that were expressed were very personal, these very personal senses of loss because of people who no longer have fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers. And what they were talking about today resonated with so many people that you don't have to be related to someone on board that plane to be feeling that loss. We heard some very emotional words today from former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, who surprised everyone by getting very emotional at the microphone while delivering some very powerful words. Listen.
10 years ago today, many of us stood upon a nearby field
we were angry, and we were heartbroken. And as the days and weeks and months unfolded, your story to us became known. And we wondered, would we? Could we? Had we been in your place, shown the same resolve, the same selflessness, the same astonishing valor?
Had we been in your place, what would I have done? And that's a question that so many individuals have asked themselves as they board airplanes over the last decade, Frederica. You may have, I know I have, as I've gotten on airplanes. I immediately began talking to people right after all this happened on 9/11. I talked to people just as they began flying again. They weren't thinking about the World Trade Center, but because they were getting on an airplane, they were relating to the people here and the sacrifice they made to make sure that plane did not reach its target.
All right, David Mattingly, thank you so much from Shanksville. So when the president left Shanksville, he also made his way to the Pentagon, where he also laid a wreath. CNN's Jessica Yellen joining us now live from the White House. So, Jessica, the president covered all bases. He was at Ground Zero. He made his way to Shanksville and then returning to Washington by going to the Pentagon.
Hi, Frederica. Yes, if there was an emotional impact on the president today, you saw it in images rather than hearing it in words. The president has said very little today, in fact. He started at Ground Zero, where he was with former President Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush. It was the first time the two men have been together since relief efforts for Haiti. The president got a look there at the Ground Zero Memorial, and we're told by a press spokesperson that he was impressed with what he saw. We're told he felt that it meets the moment, and he was touched by the serenity of the moment, the serenity of the setting and the families. There, the president read part of Psalm 42, which we're told he chose because it speaks to persevering through difficult challenges and emerging stronger. Here's just a portion of the psalm he read.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. There is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High.
Frederica, from there, he went on to Shanksville to visit the impact site of Flight 93. And as you mentioned in the introduction to this hour, he walked through a new memorial and laid a wreath, a very solemn moment. But there was also a change in energy there. He spent a great deal of time shaking hands with the crowd who had gathered, and that crowd was a little different in nature from the crowd at Ground Zero. Families there were chanting USA, shouting the president's name to some extent, and he did spend a long time shaking hands there. And then his next stop at the Pentagon. Also, just a few hours ago, he laid a wreath, spending time speaking to families there. He is back here at the White House now for a brief stop, but his day, which began before dusk, is not over. He has still another event to go before the day is done. Frederica.
All right, Jessica Yellen at the White House. Thanks so much. People all around the world remembered 9/11 in different ways. I'll show you how some of them marked the anniversary. People all around the world mark the anniversary of 9/11 here on American soil in very different ways. Our Josh Leves has been tracking all of that. So it is not just something that has touched Americans, but people all over.
You have ceremonies going on all over the world today, and in some cases it's Americans taking part in it, and in other cases it's just people all over the world who felt really touched by what happened and wanted to weigh in. What I want to start off with is in Sydney, Australia, a group of firefighters climbed 80 flights of stairs to the top of the city's tallest building to hold a ceremony. Take a look.
I just felt this was the least we could do, just to say thank you to them for giving their time.
So many of them didn't go home that day.
Now we're going to keep watching this. The firefighters held a moment of silence in Sydney Tower for the firefighters who died on 9/11. And you're going to see here a young firefighter's heartache. That was a story. There you go. From our affiliate, 9 News. And so many people feel exactly what he's feeling. Let's jump over to Paris now. I want you to see this. This is where an organization today unveiled replicas of the Twin Towers, about 80 feet tall. A crowd turned out in the wind and pouring rain to be there for that, to remember 9/11 today. Yes, beautiful. Meanwhile, over in Spain, really interesting ceremony out of Madrid today. They planted 10 trees, marking 10 years since the anniversary, and the father of the one Spaniard who was killed in the attacks helped to lead that ceremony today. Really striking ceremony out of London. This was outside the U.S. Embassy at a memorial there. People who lost loved ones recited their names. And then, look at these pictures. They laid these long stem white roses, and some of them had these photos, black and white photos, of the loved ones who had died in the 9/11 attacks. A lot of dignitaries spoke there. Prince Charles was among them.
Although that dreadful act of violence was meant to divide us, it has actually drawn us together. One person to another, one community to another.
And also the Pope spoke today. Pope Benedict XVI gave some comments, and here's what he said. He said, I invite the leaders of nations and men of goodwill to reject violence always as a solution to problems. He said to resist the temptation to hate and to work within society based on the principles of solidarity, justice, and peace. So, Fred, that's just a sampling, but dozens of countries today had ceremonies all over the world. Lots of people really wanted to turn out, wanting to be a part of this day, wanting to reflect, pause, remember.
And people have been weighing in via social media as well.
This is actually really fascinating. It's part of the 9/11 story for the world. Very interesting. And we can show everyone my page because people are weighing in today. I've been hearing from people all over the world. There I am, Facebook and Twitter, Josh Lives CNN. The blog is cnn.com/Josh. People are weighing in from all over the world saying they want to feel a part of this community today. Some are expats in different countries wanting to talk to other Americans. And they're reaching out online and having these conversations. And in some cases, I've been hearing all day from people in dozens of other countries saying that they really feel a lot. Even some of them have never been to the United States. And they feel a great deal today. And they want the world to know that. And they're using these new tools to get that out
I've
there.
heard from a lot of people on Twitter, too, who've talked about the poignant moments of the day. Those moments that really hang with them for a long time, that kind of punctuate what happened, especially hearing from the children today, talking about missing their parents,
They're
their
sharing.
loved ones.
It's moments like that. They talk about what they're feeling, what's most poignant to them, and they have this desire to share today, and they're doing that every which way.
Josh Leves, thanks so much. Thanks for bringing all of that to us. All right, you want to check your Sunday paper today because many comics today are focusing on 9/11 and remembering the heroes who perished 10 years ago, but in a very different way. Here's a sample. You can see more on CNN.com, and we will be back in a moment. Today, the eyes of the nation focused on 3 places of profound sadness: Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the Pentagon, and Lower Manhattan, New York City. Public events dedicated to this 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attack started early at Ground Zero with the president then and the president now.
We will not fear. Even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge.
Please join in observing our first moment of silence.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. How
words cannot ease the pain of these losses. Paying tribute by recalling not just the horror of that day, but the heroism as well, can hopefully give you some comfort and stiffen the resolve of this nation.
We are still the freest, most blessed nation in this treasured world. And we will long honor that role with the memory and guidance of 40 good shepherds.
I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost.
Gerard A. Barbara.
And my father, Sean Edward Bowman Jr.
Firefighter Gary Richard Box.
Christopher Joseph Blackwell. And my dad, Michael Batch.
We will always love you. And as you always said, Daddy, we got your back. God bless New York City, and God bless America.
God bless every soul that we lost. God bless the family members who have to endure that loss. And God guide us to our reunion in heaven. And God bless the United States of America.
We think of all the people who died on September 11th. We have to remember the hundreds of children who lost their mom or dad.
And when your friends complain, like, oh, my dad's so annoying, or like, he won't let me go out, or he won't let me do this, it's like, you get mad because you would do anything to have that.
Still ahead, the tragedy's youngest victims reflecting on the last 10 years. For the children of 9/11, today isn't just the anniversary of an American catastrophe. It means it has been 10 years since they lost a mom or a dad. Looking at the World Trade Center site where so many lives were lost, you can't help but think about these young faces of tragedy.
On 9/11, I lost my father, John Robinson Lenore.
Benjamin Keith Clark. He's an executive chef.
My dad was Alvin Romero.
My uncle's name was Edward Lichshine.
Sergeant John Coughlin. I was in my 5th grade class, and our teacher said, everyone look outside the window.
My teacher said it was just a little accident. Then I realized that it was much bigger than that.
My first thought was, is my father okay?
We were all in her bedroom watching this TV show.
I remember asking her, like, oh, Mom, what movie are you watching?
I remember she said that they're all gone.
I guess it just didn't click to me that what I was watching just wasn't a movie.
And, like, I remember looking out the window just thinking the whole thing was a dream.
Nobody else has lost a parent on national television, on the news. Nobody else has seen it happen over and over again. And that's something that we all have to live with.
My mother sat us down and had every cop's kid's worst nightmare talk that Daddy wasn't coming home. My little sister at the time just screamed out loud. All of a sudden, I was the oldest of the family. I had to step up right at that exact minute.
I was very, very angry. I know I punched the wall.
And I saw the world as like a gross, vulgar place full of hatred.
I do not remember a good 2 years of my life because I, like, just emotionally have blocked it all out.
Yeah, I don't really remember anything about it. Sometimes I think it was a better thing that I didn't know him and then he was, like, taken away from me. Or if it was the worst thing that I didn't get to spend, like, the little time I would have known with him. And when your friends complain, like, oh, my dad's so annoying, or, like, he won't let me go out, or he won't let me do this, it's like, you get mad because you would do anything to have that. And they complain and they don't really appreciate what they have.
If we're talking about 9/11 in class.
And everybody would, like, turn around and stare at me.
They almost know that I was affected by it directly.
Sometimes it makes me feel a tiny bit agitated because it's not like I would want to be known as, oh, his dad died, his dad was killed. I don't want to be known as that. I just want them to know me as me, like for who I am.
Anywhere you went, we're right away labeled as the 9/11 kids.
You always get people who are trying to help saying, like, I know how you feel, everything's gonna be okay.
Brittany, I'm sorry that this happened to you, or Brittany, is there anything we can do? It makes me feel kind of cornered when everyone around me is like, oh yeah, Brittany, you lost your father, are you okay?
I really think people expect us to fail sometimes. Every night I need to talk to my mom and my brother right before I go to sleep because I'm always afraid something's gonna happen to them too.
Because I'm afraid of, if I lost one parent, I'm afraid of losing the other.
Life is short.
It could be taken away in an instant, just like it did on that Tuesday morning.
I cry more, I grieve more because now I recognize what I've lost.
My mother will stand in the middle of the kitchen and be like, can you please stop acting just like your father?
But my mom always tells my sister and I that we have his smile or his sense of humor.
It took me a really long time to, like, not move on from the situation, but to accept the situation. But in the end, we came out pretty well.
I'm Frederica Whitfield. Don Lemon's up next from Tampa.
On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, a full day of solemn remembrances. That was cellist Yo-Yo Ma this morning at Ground Zero in Manhattan. I'm Don Lemon. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm in Tampa, Florida, where preparations are underway for Monday's CNN Tea Party Republican debate. But we're going to begin with 9/11 observances around the country. In New York, a tree-filled plaza now surrounds two large square fountains where the Twin Towers once stood. One by one, the names were read aloud of the people who died on this date exactly 10 years ago today. Ceremonies at the Pentagon as well today. 184 people died when American Airlines Flight 77 flew into the side of the building. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, there was also a ceremony at the site where United Airlines Flight 93 went down in a field. We want to go to our chief White House correspondent right now, Jessica Yellen. Jessica, a long and emotional day for everyone, including the president.
That's right, Don. This is a day that started before dusk for the president and still hasn't ended. He began at Ground Zero, where he was with former President George Bush. You know, interesting to note, the last time those two men spoke was the night Osama bin Laden was killed. Today, he got a look at the 9/11 memorial. We're told that he was impressed with it, that he said he felt it meets the moment. And he was moved by the serenity of today, by the families and the gathering and the setting he saw there. The president, in his only public remarks so far today, read from Psalm 46. We're told he chose that psalm because it speaks, in his view, to persevering through difficult challenges and emerging stronger. From that site, he went to Shanksville with the First Lady, where he visited the impact site of Flight 93. He walked through a new memorial there and laid a wreath at the site there, a very solemn moment. But he also took quite a bit of time, Don, to shake hands with the crowd there. And this crowd was much more vocal than the crowd that he had seen at Ground Zero. At some points, they were calling his name and even chanting USA, USA repeatedly. Then his next stop was at the Pentagon just a few hours ago, where they sang Amazing Grace. They laid another wreath. And again, he spent some time speaking with the families of those lost. And this day of remembrance, it still is not over. You know, Don, for a president who really is known for his words, today has been so emotional, not for what has been said, but really for all of these images.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Even though the earth be removed, though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, Though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling, there is a river whose stream shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High.
And again, to date, those are his only public remarks of the day, Psalm 46. We have yet to hear from him tonight when he will be making remarks in his own words. Don.
Jessica Yellen, thank you very much, Jessica. We appreciate it. You know, they may be miles from any of the attack sites, but cities and towns throughout the nation are recognizing this day in their own ways. In Georgia, at the Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park, volunteers put up a flag for each life lost on September 11th. Nearly 3,000 people were killed that day. The flags will fly through Friday. American flags are blowing in the breeze in Tempe, Arizona, in a park there at what's being called the Healing Field. Every victim of the 9/11 attacks is represented by a flag on an 8-foot-tall pole, each with a card carrying the victims' names and a short biography. It is the 8th year in a row that volunteers have set up the flags. You know, against the backdrop of this somber occasion, a hyper-awareness of potential security threats. Well, today, incidents of 2 airline flights were suspicious enough to attract attention. I want to go now to CNN's Brian Todd. He is in Washington with the very latest information. So, Brian, let's begin with the Los Angeles to New York flight that triggered a scramble by F-16s. What happened?
Well, Don, that was American Airlines Flight 34 from Los Angeles to JFK Airport in New York. A passenger on board alerted the crew to a security concern involving at least one person. The captain was alerted, investigated, and chose not to declare a security threat, we're told. No one on board the plane requested military or law enforcement assistance, but out of an abundance of caution, authorities scrambled 2 F-16 fighter jets to shadow the plane until it landed safely at Kennedy Airport at about 4:10 p.m., a little less than 2 hours ago, 4:10 Eastern Time. Now, we're told law enforcement met the flight and is interviewing passengers. Now, in that second incident, the flight crew on board Frontier Airlines Flight 623 from Denver to Detroit observed at least 2 men behaving suspiciously. We have a tower cam picture of the tarmac in Detroit. A Frontier spokesman tells CNN this involved one man spending about 20 minutes in the bathroom in the back of the plane while another man waited in a forward galley. Then they alternated those positions, and that got the crew suspicious. The Frontier spokesman says the crew did not feel threatened. They checked out the plane and found there was nothing wrong. The plane with 116 passengers and 4 crew members aboard landed safely in Detroit, but we're told that at that point, law enforcement took 3 people into custody. Now, that, of course, differs a little bit. 2 people were acting suspiciously, we're told, but 3 were taken into custody. They are being questioned now, we're told, by FBI, other federal officials, and local law enforcement. The TSA has been checking out that aircraft, according to the Frontier spokesman, Don. So a little bit of the jitters here on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, leading to some of these security measures.
Understood, Brian Todd. Thank you very much for that. You know, for many survivors of 9/11, the anniversary brings back a flood of sights and sounds from that day.
I'm sitting here and I'm seeing the flames in front of me on this beautiful morning.
That was our very own Barbara Starr. She was inside the Pentagon. She'll tell us what it was like when a plane going 500 miles an hour slammed into that building. The CNN Election Express is here in Tampa. We're gearing up for Monday's big CNN Tea Party Republican debate, and we'll do a little debating of our own.
For generations, people will study the story of Flight 93. They will learn that individual choices make a difference, that love and sacrifice can triumph over evil and hate, and that what happened above this Pennsylvania field ranks among the most courageous acts in American history.
From Shanksville to the Pentagon, thousands remember the heroes of 9/11 today. President Obama laid a wreath at the Pentagon memorial site. 184 people died when American Airlines Flight 77 flew into the side of the building. Our very own Barbara Starr was in the building that Tuesday morning doing her job as a Pentagon correspondent when the plane hit. She recounts those horrifying moments, and September 11th also just happens to be her birthday.
You were either here that day or you weren't. For the people who work in the building today who were there 10 years ago, I don't think you can ever forget. I'm sitting here and I'm seeing the flames in front of me on this beautiful morning. 9/11 is my birthday, and I woke up that morning, looked out the window, the weather was beautiful, and I thought, how little time could I possibly spend at work? I'll put something nice on, I'll go out to dinner with friends, and it'll be a nice birthday. But then, New York. 10 years ago, this was the area where the Pentagon press corps was working. That morning, we'd been watching the attacks unfold in New York. I came out in this hallway, and suddenly there was a Pentagon policeman coming from that direction, running down this hallway, yelling, "Get out, get out. Everybody get out. We've been hit. Get out." American Airlines Flight 77 slammed into the Pentagon. By the time I made my way from my office down there to this part of the hallway, it was full of people. We could smell the smoke. Hundreds of people coming into this hallway, coming down the stairs from the upper floors, coming up the stairs from the basement. The doors had closed shut due to the security alert, so it took a few minutes for them to open them and for people to begin to make their way out to safety. This entire side of the Pentagon was a wall of flame and black smoke. I remember seeing people coming out of the wreckage where the plane had hit, some covered in blood, trying to make their way to safety. Hundreds of workers had gathered over here. At one point, before a large number of police or fire personnel could even get here, they called for people who had any kind of emergency or medical training, and hundreds of military people came moving back in towards the wreckage to help in any way that they could. That's what it was really all about here. On that day, in this place, for the U.S. military, no retreat, no surrender. Barbara Starr, CNN, the Pentagon.
The war in Afghanistan began less than a month after the 9/11 attacks. In that country today, servicemen and women mark the 10th anniversary of the event that led our country to launch a war against the Taliban. This was the scene at Bagram Air Base outside Kabul. While soldiers paused to reflect at one base, at another, there was a reminder that the battle is not over. CNN's Rochelle Carey is in the studio with that and the day's other top stories. Hello, Rochelle.
Hey, Don, thank you. On the eve of the anniversary, the Taliban showed it can still launch a dangerous attack, a suicide attack overnight on a coalition base in Afghanistan, left 2 civilians dead and as many as 77 NATO personnel wounded. Most of the injured are Americans, but none of the injuries are expected to be life-threatening. Militants used a truck loaded with explosives to carry out that suicide attack. The Swedish Security Service says it arrested 4 people overnight suspected of plotting a terror attack in the country's second-largest city. Police are holding the 4 for probable cause of preparing attacks. The head of the Security Service warned last week that Islamic terrorism is the country's biggest threat. Another son of Muammar Gaddafi has fled Libya. An official in Niger tells CNN that Saudi Gaddafi has arrived in his country along with 8 former officials. The fleeing Libyans were accepted on humanitarian grounds. At the same time, fighters loyal to the new Libyan government are trying to stamp out the last pockets of pro-Gaddafi resistance. Government forces are regrouping outside Bani Walid while trying to cut off supplies to Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. And at least 24 new wildfires have erupted in Texas. We're keeping count. That is nearly 180 in just the last week. The fires have destroyed more than 1,000 homes across the state. Texas is experiencing its driest weather since 1895. President Obama traveled to all 3 locations devastated by the terror attacks 10 years ago today. This afternoon, he attended a remembrance at the Pentagon where 184 victims died. And earlier, He walked the fields of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, remembering the 40 lost there. And the president began his day at the ceremony at Ground Zero, where 2,753 people were killed. Tonight, the president will speak during a concert for hope at the Kennedy Center. Let's go back to you, Don Lemon, now in Tampa.
All right, Rochelle Carey, we'll see you a little bit later on. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Proof today that the brotherhood of firefighters spans the globe. Firefighters in Australia pay tribute to the firefighters who lost their lives at Ground Zero. And see Asia's spiritual and sentimental tributes to the victims of 9/11. We're doing a little globe trekking when we come back here. There's no doubt terrorists were targeting America 10 years ago, but today it's the world that is mourning all who were lost on September 11, 2001. Pope Benedict XVI offered a prayer in memory of the victims during a service in Ancona, Italy. His was one of many tributes from South America to Asia and even beyond. CNN's international editor, Azadeh Ansari, is here to tell us about all of them. Azadeh, the French have built an amazing memorial and built it near their icon, the Eiffel Tower. Tell us about it.
Hi, Don. They have, and it's their replicas of the the World Trade Center, the two towers that they built, two large scaffoldings that they have, and it's wrapped in white cloth with the names of the victims right on it. And then at the top it says September 11th, the French will never forget, as you can see here. And this is at Place du Trocadero, which is across the way. It's a famous plaza across the way from the Eiffel Tower. You can have a nice view there of one of the towers that they have up. And there were about hundreds of people that gathered at this memorial service, and it was one of the largest that were held around the world, and we'll get to a few of the other ones in a second. So
yeah, it's interesting to see those. I mean, to see beyond the United States what people are doing. The folks here who are, you know, in studio with me or on the set with me are looking at these pictures. That's quite amazing. And you know, also, Azadeh, water was a powerful theme at Ground Zero at the memorial, and we're seeing the Chinese use water to remember this anniversary as well.
Right. So the memorial service that took place in Beijing happened in front of the U.S. Embassy, and it was led by Gary Locke, the U.S. ambassador to China. And as you can see here, he's there with some kids, and they're like paper lanterns that they're setting afloat as a symbol of peace and hope. And they're kind of in the shape of water lilies, if you can get a close look there. Very colorful and more of a peaceful memorial there in China, in Beijing.
Yeah. You know, after the United States, Azadeh, the United Kingdom lost most victims on 9/11. British citizens killed at the World Trade Center were many. They were numerous. How did the UK recognize this day?
Well, I also want to mention, Don, that 90 countries lost citizens in these attacks, and you're absolutely right, the UK having lost the most. Now, these remembrances were led by Prince Charles here. You can see him laying a wreath here, and Prime Minister David Cameron. And the thing is that they had the families of the victims walk up, mention the name of their loved ones and the lost loved ones, and they went ahead and placed a long white stem rose on the memorial garden that's been created here for them, and each rose had a black and white picture attached to it of the family's member that had fallen. So.
And Azadeh, you know, I understand firefighters around the world are also paying tribute.
Yeah, that's right. So in Sydney, this is probably one of the more symbolic memorials that we've seen, and you can see this is video from News 9, one of our affiliates. And we had a group of firefighters in Sydney rushed up the Sydney tower, and what they did is that once they got up there, they overlooked the city, and one of them, he has a very emotional response to this, and they had a moment of silence. And the whole gesture there was to symbolize the rush that the firefighters made up the towers to save the lives of hundreds upon hundreds of people the day of the attacks.
Azadeh Ansari, remembrances around the world. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to lighten the mood right now because it's been a very tough day, a very emotional day for everyone. Football fever in the air. It's the first Sunday action in the NFL season, but one very important quarterback, MIA, is missing. And college players who thought they signed up to just play football, but quickly discovered after 9/11 they were committed to a whole lot more. We're going to talk all about it with Sports Illustrated's John Wertheim in just a moment. Move on now and talk about the 9/11 anniversary in New York, in Washington, and Pennsylvania. A day of solemn remembrances on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. A moment of silence at Ground Zero this morning at 8:46. That's when American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower exactly 10 years ago, the start of the worst terror attack in U.S. history. Now the site is a sacred memorial to the nearly 3,000 people who died that day. The footprints of the Twin Towers transformed into deep fountains. One by one, the names were read aloud of the people who died. Ceremonies were observed at the Pentagon as well, a wreath laying for the 184 people killed when American Airlines Flight 77 flew into the side of the building. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a ceremony at the site where United Airlines Flight 93 went down in a field. The passengers had fought back against their hijackers. CNN's Poppy Harlow is in New York for us tonight. Poppy, we've had 10 years to prepare for this day, but now actually seeing those fountains where the Twin Towers once stood, the enormity of it all is simply overwhelming to many. What's it been like there today?
It is. I mean, even Don, you know, for me, I moved here to New York September 2001. So this has sort of come full circle for me seeing this here. And I've been watching it all unfold since 8 a.m. when the president was here, also joined by President Bush making remarks. What stood out to me, Don, about this morning was that it was a beautiful, crisp September day, just like September 11th, 10 years ago. The sky was blue. There were no clouds. It was really astonishing there for a few hours during the ceremony. Obviously, all of the names read. 2,606 Americans died in the towers right behind me. And also there was something very important, Don, going uptown from where we are now. That is where hundreds and hundreds of firefighters and their loved ones met for their memorial service. A lot of the firefighters, the first responders, were not invited to this ceremony because there wasn't room, so they gathered there. There was an incredibly emotional moment. Katie Devlin, who is the daughter of a firefighter who was rescuing people on 9/11, who lost his life. She was just a young girl when it happened. She sang Amazing Grace, and this was one of the key moments of today. Take a minute to listen.
I once was lost.
You can do it. Keep strong.
But now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
Don, talk about a city, a country coming together for that girl, but also just for everyone on today, September 11th. I have to tell you, from a personal standpoint, being down here all day felt more hopeful than it really did somber. The memorial opened, which just is astonishingly beautiful. These two pools filled with water. The names of each of the victims etched out around the pools. The family members were let in for the first time ever today to go find their loved one's name. Many of them put their hands on it. They etched the name into a piece of paper, which they took home with them today. And for a father who I just sat down with, Don, about half an hour ago, who lost his 25-year-old daughter here from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, he told me, I have a whole new family. I have a family of New Yorkers. He was with people that dug in the rubble, searching for his daughter, Don. And to hear a story like that, obviously he'll never get through the loss, but it's about people coming together. And today, I think, was really, really about that. And you saw it play out here at Ground Zero. You saw it play out at the Firefighters Memorial. You saw it in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And you saw it at the Pentagon. And it was very uplifting, Don.
Hey, Poppy, stick with me just for a moment here as we look at some of the video of the memorials today. I think it's interesting that you said that, because just sitting at home and being with people as we're watching, because we've seen a lot of images today of burning towers and of planes hitting buildings and what have you. And I think it's been a very depressing day for people who are watching television. And it's quite a juxtaposition to what you said if you actually were at one of these memorials. Quite frankly, you weren't seeing all the images from 10 years ago. You were seeing the people who were there celebrating the lives of these people rather than the deaths.
That's exactly right. I'm so glad you bring that up, because today, since I got down here, I wasn't watching television. I was watching the memorial play out. I was watching families who went in to see their loved ones' names. I was watching families who gathered at restaurants nearby to have dinner together. There was actually smiling going on, a lot of hugging. The father that I just told you about, who lost his 25-year-old daughter, Andrea, brought me up to another man, Tom, and said, "This is a man that I thank so much. This is a man that's sort of part of my new family." They know what they've lost, and they do what they can with what they have. So, of course, it's somber. Of course, it is heart-wrenching. But for a lot of people, I think today, walking into that memorial, which, Don, hasn't been open until this morning, was a renewal for them. I really think it was. I can never know their pain, but I can tell you that I saw some hope today.
You know what? That's good, because a lot of us, as I said, felt very depressed watching all those images today, and it's good that maybe the people who were there didn't feel at least that way in somewhat. Thank you very much, Poppy Harlow. We appreciate it. Fighter jets were scrambled today because of reports of suspicious activities aboard 2 domestic flights. Both planes landed safely, and there were no further signs of trouble, but 3 people were taken into custody from a Frontier airline flight from Denver after it landed in Detroit. F-16s also shadowed an American Airlines flight from Los Angeles to New York after reports several passengers were behaving strangely. President Barack Obama traveled to all 3 sites of the 9/11 attacks, and he is planning to pay further tribute tonight at an event at the Kennedy Center. Joining us now live is our chief White House correspondent, Jessica Yellen. Jessica, what's ahead for the president tonight? I know that this Kennedy Center event is ahead, but does he have other events to attend?
The big event tonight is this Kennedy Center event, Don, and it is the first time we'll hear the president today speak in his own words. Previously, we only heard him read from a psalm. I'm told by an official here that his remarks will be about resilience. He'll talk about Americans and what we've lost, but also what we still retain, what hasn't changed about America, our character, our values, our way of life. And I'm told that in preparation for the speech, he studied different passages from the Bible and some past speeches. He'll also make remarks about our men and women in uniform and how they have sacrificed the most in the last 10 years, and how the 3 symbols, the most visible reminders of America's strength and resilience, are those 3 symbols, those 3 places he visited today: Ground Zero, Shanksville, and that site at the Pentagon. I'm told the remarks last for about 10 to 15 minutes, and they start in just about an hour, Don.
And we're going to carry him here, Jessica Yellen, on CNN. You'll be able to see the president's remarks live. Jessica, thank you very much, reporting from the White House. You know, Tea Party candidates get ready for a big GOP debate on Monday night, but they're not alone. Democrats will be watching, too. Next, we'll talk with Brad Woodhouse, communications director for the DNC, and Tea Party chairwoman Amy Kramer to preview the contenders. And if you want to tweet me about this, or you can check me out on my blog or on Facebook, do it right now. I'm looking at all your comments, especially as it comes to what's happening with our debate on Monday night.
I'm Rochelle Carey at the CNN World Headquarters in Atlanta. Back to Don in Tampa in a moment. First, let's check our top stories. Somber ceremonies today mark the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks.
Harlan.
Francis Harrows.
Harvey L. Harrell.
Stephen.
The names of nearly 3,000 people who died that day were read aloud at the site where the Twin Towers once stood. The building's footprints, now deep fountains, beautiful fountains surrounded by names engraved in stone. Observances also held today at the 2 other 9/11 sites, the Pentagon and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. President Obama was on hand to lay wreaths at both locations. The Swedish Security Service says it arrested 4 people overnight suspected of plotting a terror attack in the country's second largest city. Police are holding the 4 for probable cause of preparing attacks. The head of the security service warned last week that Islamic terrorism is the country's biggest threat. Sweden, that is, has witnessed terrorism in the past. A suicide bomber wounded 2 people in the capital, Stockholm, last December. We all remember that. And the Taliban isn't letting the 9/11 anniversary pass without a reminder of what they are capable of. A suicide bombing at a military base in eastern Afghanistan has wounded as many as 77 American troops and killed at least 2 Afghans. Barbara Starr joins us by phone from Washington. Barbara, we're just learning in the last few minutes specifically that the 77 injured are in fact Americans.
Indeed, Rochelle, U.S. defense officials saying that they believe now that most of the 77 injured were, in fact, American troops. This is a small combat outpost, a relatively small post in central eastern Afghanistan in a place called Wardak province that has seen a lot of fighting over the years. And for 77 people to be injured, even with minor injuries, that tells you the size and scope of the vehicle bomb that detonated at the front gate, killing the suicide bomber and at least 2 others that were Afghan laborers by all accounts. Top U.S. official saying this was a significant and high-profile attack. The Taliban did claim responsibility for it. It's an area of Afghanistan, as I said, that has seen fighting, but there's no indication at this point that this attack, even though it occurred on the eve of the 9/11 anniversary yesterday, that it was associated with any of the terrorist threats that Americans are paying so much attention to here at home. Rochelle?
And Barbara, has there been any chatter in recent days, recent weeks to give officials a heads up that something like this might be coming, other than just the fact that it's 9/11?
This part of Afghanistan, Rochelle, the eastern section, much like southern Afghanistan, that has really seen the bulk of the fighting over the years. I don't know that they had anything specific, but these kinds of suicide attacks, sadly, are growing increasingly common, and troops are increasingly watchful for them. Still remains to be seen how such a large suicide vehicle bomb got so close to a gate before it detonated and caused so much havoc. Rochelle?
77 injuries, 2 fatalities. Barbara Starr reporting from Washington. Barbara, thank you so much. Let's get back to Don Lemon in Tampa now.
On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, our CNN hero is a New Yorker who was deeply moved by the outpouring of help his city received after the attacks. In 2004, Jeff Parnas established a nonprofit that sends volunteers from New York to rebuild other disaster-stricken communities. Take a look.
September 11th was a very tough time for the fire department. I lost some friends, guys I went to the academy with. The day afterwards, people came from everywhere to help us out. It was incredible. You knew you weren't alone.
As a New Yorker, to see that outpouring of kindness and generosity was more powerful than the terror that happened. That really changed me.
I'm Jeff Parnas, and I just want to show the world that New Yorkers will never forget what people did for us following 9/11.
Every year on the 9/11 anniversary, we take volunteers from New York and send them to some part of the country where they had a disaster and help folks rebuild.
Sorry, nice to meet you. You pull into town, and the tallest thing there is the grain silo. It's definitely a little culture shock.
Rebuilding homes or barns or churches, it's our way to say thank you. Now, more than half our volunteers are not from New York. People from all the small towns that we've helped, they keep showing up to help the next community. They're from Louisiana and California and Indiana and Illinois. Every year you keep seeing more T-shirts from more locations.
We're going to pitch in as much as we can.
After Katrina, we just jumped on his bandwagon. This whole paying it forward thing is just contagious.
It's like this big dysfunctional family reunion of all these disaster survivors who get together and do a barn raising.
You're banging nails and building something, but it's the relationships that help you heal.
It's about using the 9/11 anniversary to celebrate that volunteer spirit.
We'll see y'all next year.
People say thank you for doing this. And I said, you want to thank me? Show up on the next one.
To find out more about Jeff's work or to make a donation, go to CNNheroes.com. And be sure to join the conversation on CNN Heroes Facebook and Twitter pages. A complex program was used on the Ground Zero Memorial to group the names of 9/11 victims. Our tech reporter Katie Linendahl is next to tell us all about it. Today, the city of New York dedicated a memorial to the victims who died at the World Trade Center on 9/11. But the names aren't in any kind of simple alphabetical order. The memorial's creators used a complex program to group the victims' names in a way that better reflects their lives and their relationships. That's very interesting. Tech reporter Katie Linendahl joins us now to explain it. So, how did this work, and how do you know where to look for the names?
Yes, hi, Don. So surrounding the two memorial pools of water are 76 bronze plates with the name etchings of nearly 3,000 victims of 9/11. But as you noted, the names are not alphabetized. They're not placed in any grid or any sort of order. They're actually placed in meaningful adjacencies per the requests of 1,800 friends and family members. That means people that had an instant bond or friends and family members will be grouped together. But this was only made possible by a very complex computer program. And you might be saying to yourself, well, why was this so difficult to lay out? Well, understand, not only do you have 76 of these very large bronze panels that have to be grouped and then subgrouped by the names, you also have to take into consideration typography. Which names can span two panels? Names ending with a T cannot be followed with first names beginning with a J. Also, how many names are going to follow on a grid? So the city of New York didn't know if this was possible. And Local Projects, a group here in New York City that actually took on the project, hired freelance computer programmer Jared Thorpe, who I had the chance to speak with and say, how did you actually go about and lay this out? And he told me it took the algorithm about a month to create and then 6 months later to actually make everything tweak and everything laid out to really create this human connection. And what was amazing was, with the success of the software, showed something much deeper. We start to see all of these names that had much more meaning behind them. We take, for example, Cantor Fitzgerald, a financial firm. 704 employees were lost, and this loss was so significant that these names take up half of the pools, the bronze slabs around one pool, showing the impact of such a terrible event. And then also two brothers, John and Joseph Vigiano, 34 and 36 years old, that were passed away that day. They were first responders, but now, Don, they can be forever memorialized right next to each other on the bronze plating.
So what do you do? Do you look for the company they worked for? What do you look for?
Yeah, it's a good question because there are still 3,000 names to go for, and understand that they aren't grouped alphabetically. So there will be kiosks on site at the memorial. But also, even if you don't know anybody, I really encourage you to go onto this site. It's names.911memorial.org. And it's so incredibly impactful to just be able to search these names and see their profile pop up and their picture. And as I said, every name has a true meaning behind it. But also, there is an app that was also created by the people that created the memorial. It is Memorial Guide. It is a free app. If you have a smartphone, it will help you find any names placed on the memorial, Don.
All right, Katie Linendahl, we appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again next weekend. Hey, I want to tell our viewers that we're waiting the president. He's going to speak on the 9/11 anniversary. He's going to speak at a ceremony in Washington, and we're going to carry it for you live. In the meantime, we'll be right back. Our iReporters are sharing their experiences as they remember the 9/11 attacks today. iReporter Kathy Cordison took these photos of steel beams recovered from Ground Zero on display at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda, California. She says when she ran her fingers along the beams, she was overwhelmed with emotion. She says that anniversary just brings back all the memories of that day. And iReporter Julio Ortiz-Tessanier visited 2 fire stations in New York City today. He says while the World Trade Center Memorial is being seen by millions around the world, many smaller, intimate memorials are appearing in firehouses and neighborhoods throughout the city. Neighbors came to visit the men on duty over this weekend, some bringing flowers, some stopping to say thank you and remembering the firefighters who sacrificed so much for 9/11. I'm Don Lemon in Tampa, Florida. The next hour of the CNN Newsroom begins right now. All right, straight ahead, we're going to talk about the CNN debate, the Tea Party Republican debate We're going to talk a little bit later about that this hour, but first we want to let you know that the President of the United States is expected to speak in just a few minutes on this, the 10th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. You're looking live now at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. This is going to be a concert for hope in Washington, and as soon as this gets underway, when the President makes his remarks, we're going to bring that event in part to you live right here on CNN, so don't go anywhere. But before that, I want to tell you about a developing story. It's about the war in Afghanistan. It began less than a month after 9/11, and today a reminder that tens of thousands of Americans remain in harm's way there. A suicide bombing at a base in eastern Afghanistan has wounded as many as 77 American troops and killed at least 2 Afghan civilians. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attacks that used a truck carrying explosives. Officials credited a barrier at the base's entrance with protecting the soldiers inside. Most of the injuries are not thought to be life-threatening. We'll update you on that. In New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania, a day of solemn remembrances on the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
Janice Julius Brown.
Bernard C. Brown II.
Patrick John Brown.
Lloyd Stanford Brown. Sandy Wah Bradshaw.
A somber reading of all the names of the people who died in the terror attacks exactly 10 years ago today. The readings were interrupted only by moments of silence at key times. President Barack Obama and New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg were among the dignitaries on hand for the formal dedication of the memorial site at Ground Zero. The footprints of the Twin Towers now transformed into deep fountains.
Christian Adams.
And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a ceremony at the site where United Airlines Flight 93 went down in a field. The passengers had fought back against their hijackers, forcing it down before it could reach its target.
Today, our capital.
I once was lost, but now am found.
Ceremonies were held at the Pentagon as well. 184 people died when American Airlines Flight 77 flew into the side of that building. CNN's Poppy Harlow is live for us in New York. Poppy, you know, it's a sad occasion, but for people who were at Ground Zero today, it's an uplifting experience. What's it been like?
It really is. I mean, I've been watching it all unfold since 8 o'clock this morning when it was a beautiful, crisp September morning, a lot like it was on September 11th. And throughout the day, after those names are read, all the family members, Don, this was a very touching moment, were led inside the memorial for the first time to find the name of their loved one. And that was an incredible moment. I also spent a lot of the day talking to people, talking to folks that were here that were survivors. And that is something that is incredibly uplifting. You know, in where the buildings were behind me, the World Trade Center, over 2,600 people died. But Tom Cavanaugh was not one of them. And I want to play you a little bit of sound. We had a chance to talk this afternoon about his experience. To set it up here, he worked on the 47th floor of Tower 1, the North Tower, and he certainly felt that explosion, as everyone did. He managed to escape to get down to the ground level, but then as he was trying to get out, Don, the South Tower completely collapsed on top of him. He was buried in the rubble, and amazingly, he got out. He thought he was going to die. His pants were on fire, and he climbed out. He dug his way out along with another man. He lost, however, 3 of his close friends and coworkers. So take a listen to his survivor story.
The world just went black at that point. From that point on, the last thing I remember was hearing some sand trickle, and then it got really quiet. I like to say it's the loudest quiet I've never heard. And at that point, I thought I was dead. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face. And the first thought was, I'm dead. And then my second thought was right away, you know what, it's not that bad. I didn't feel any pain.
How did you come back here today?
I have to come back here. I come back here every year. Okay, it's very important for me. The only way that I can deal with what happened to me is by humor and by being with the people that mean the most to me that were here that day also, or that I've come in contact with. Because no matter how bad things were here that day and what happened, the greatest people I've ever met in my life, I've met because of what happened here.
pretty uplifting. I want to show you photos of Tom for the first time going into the 9/11 memorial, putting his hand on the names of the colleagues that he lost on that day. He is indeed a survivor who, he says, has really found a new family here, Don, on this day. So rather uplifting when you look at all the devastation and despair of September 11th. Don?
Poppy, appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much. And as we just mentioned, President Barack Obama visited all 3 of the 9/11 sites today to pay tribute to those who died 10 years ago. Listen, we want to go to the Kennedy Center now because moments ago, our very own Anderson Coopers, he is serving as the master of ceremony. He is introducing Alan Jackson. After Alan Jackson sings and does his performance, the President of the United States will make his remarks on the anniversary of 9/11. Alan Jackson there entering the stage, you can see to applause as he gets to pay his tribute to the people, to so many, 3,000, almost 3,000 people who lost their lives on 9/11. Let's listen in now in Washington, D.C.
Where were you when the world stopped turning on that September day? Your wife and children working on some stage in L.A. Did you stand there in shock at the sight of that black smoke rising up against that blue sky? Did you shout out in anger and fear for your neighbor? Or did you just sit down and cry? Did you weep for the children who lost their dear loved ones? Pray for the ones who don't know. Did you rejoice for the people who walk from the rubble? Sob for the ones left below. Did you burst out with pride for the red, white, and blue? The heroes who died just doing what they do. Did you look up to heaven for some kind of answer? And look at yourself and what really matters? Just a singer of simple songs. I'm not a real political man. I watch CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran. But I know Jesus and I talk to God, and I remember this one when I was young. Faith, hope, and love are some good things He gave us. Greatest is love. Where were you when the world stopped turning on that September day? Teaching a class full of innocent children, driving down some cold interstate. Did you feel guilty? 'Cause you're a survivor. In a crowded room, did you feel alone? Did you call up your mother and tell her you loved her? Did you dust off that Bible at home? Did you open your eyes, hope it never happened? Close your eyes and not go to sleep. Did you notice the sunset, first time in ages? Speak to some stranger on the street. Did you lay down at night, think of tomorrow, go out and buy you a gun? Did you turn off that violent old movie you're watching? Turn on I Love Lucy reruns? Did you go to a church, hold hands with some stranger, stand in line and give your own blood? Did you just stay home and cling tight to your family? Thank God you had somebody to love. Singer of simple songs. I'm not a real political man. I watch CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran. But I know Jesus and I talk to God, and I remember this one when I was young. Faith, hope, and love are some good things He gave us. Greatest is love. stop turning on that September day.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The Bible tells us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. 10 years ago, America confronted one of our darkest nights. Mighty towers crumbled, black smoke billowed up from the Pentagon. Airplane wreckage smoldered on a Pennsylvania field. Friends and neighbors, sisters and brothers, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, they were taken from us with a heartbreaking swiftness and cruelty. And on September 12th, 2001, we awoke to a world in which evil was closer at hand and uncertainty clouded our future. And in the decades since, much has changed for Americans. We've known war and recession, passionate debates and political divides. We can never get back the lives that were lost on that day or the Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in the wars that followed. And yet, today it is worth remembering what has not changed. Our character as a nation has not changed. Our faith in God and in each other, that has not changed. Our belief in America, born of a timeless ideal that men and women should govern themselves, that all people are created equal and deserve the same freedom to determine their own destiny, that belief, through tests and trials, has only been strengthened. These past 10 years have shown that America does not give in to fear. The rescue workers who rushed to the scene, the firefighters who charged up the stairs, the passengers who stormed the cockpit, these patriots define the very nature of courage. Over the years, we've also seen a more quiet form of heroism. In the ladder company that lost so many men and still suits up and saves lives every day. The businesses that have been rebuilt from nothing, the burn victim who's bounced back, the families who press on. Now, last spring, I received a letter from a woman named Suzanne Swain. She had lost her husband and brother in the Twin Towers and said that she had been robbed of so many would-be proud moments where a father watches their child graduate or tend a goal in a lacrosse game or succeed academically. But her daughters are in college, the other doing well in high school. It has been 10 years of raising these girls on my own, Suzanne wrote. I could not be prouder of their strength and resilience. That spirit typifies our American family. And the hopeful future for those girls is the ultimate rebuke to the hateful killers who took the life of their father. These past 10 years have shown America's resolve to defend its citizens and our way of life. Diplomats serve in far-off posts, and intelligence professionals work tirelessly without recognition. 2 million Americans have gone to war since 9/11. They've demonstrated that those who do us harm cannot hide from the reach of justice anywhere in the world. America's been defended not by conscripts, but by citizens who choose to serve. Young people who signed up straight out of high school, guardsmen and reservists, workers and business people, immigrants and fourth-generation soldiers. They are men and women who left behind lives of comfort for 2, 3, 4, 5 tours of duty. Too many will never come home. Those that do carry dark memories from distant places and the legacy of fallen friends. The sacrifices of these men and women and of our military families reminds us that the wages of war are great, and that while service to our nation is full of glory, war itself is never glorious. Our troops have been to lands unknown to many Americans a decade ago, to Kandahar and Kabul, to Mosul and Basra. But our strength is not measured in our ability to stay in these places. It comes from our commitment to leave those lands to free people and sovereign states, and our desire to move from a decade of war to a future of peace. These 10 years have shown that we hold fast to our freedoms. Yes, we're more vigilant against those who threaten us, and there are inconveniences that come with our common defense. Debates about war and peace, about security and civil liberties have often been fierce these last 10 years, but it is precisely the rigor of these debates and our ability to resolve them in a way that honors our values and our democracy that is the measure of our strength. Meanwhile, our open markets still provide innovators a chance to create and succeed. Our citizens are still free to speak their minds, and our souls are enriched in churches and temples, our synagogues and our mosques. These past 10 years underscores the bonds between all Americans. We have not succumbed to suspicion, nor have we succumbed to mistrust. After 9/11, to his great credit, President Bush made clear what we reaffirm today: the United States will never wage war against Islam or any other religion. Immigrants come here from all parts of the globe, and in the biggest cities and the smallest towns, in schools and workplaces, you still see people of every conceivable race and religion and ethnicity, all of them pledging allegiance to the flag, all of them reaching for the same American dream. E pluribus unum. Out of many, we are one. These past 10 years tell a story of our resilience. The Pentagon is repaired and filled with patriots working in common purpose. Shanksville is the scene of friendships forged between residents of that town and families who lost loved ones there. New York remains the most vibrant of capitals of arts and industry and fashion and commerce. Where the World Trade Center once stood, the sun glistens off a new tower that reaches towards the sky. Our people still work in skyscrapers. Our stadiums are still filled with fans, and our parks full of children playing ball. Our airports hum with travel, and our buses and subways take millions where they need to go. And families sit down to Sunday dinner, and students prepare for school. This land pulses with the optimism of those who set out for distant shores. and the courage of those who died for human freedom. Decades from now, Americans will visit the memorials to those who were lost on 9/11. They'll run their fingers over the places where the names of those we loved are carved into marble and stone, and they may wonder at the lives that they led. And standing before the white headstones in Arlington and in peaceful cemeteries and small-town squares in every corner of the country, they will pay respects to those lost in Iraq and Afghanistan. They'll see the names of the fallen on bridges and statues, at gardens and schools, and they will know that nothing can break the will of a truly united States of America. They will remember that we've overcome slavery and civil war. We've overcome breadlines and fascism and recession and riots and communism and, yes, terrorism. They will be reminded that we are not perfect, but our democracy is durable. And that democracy, reflecting as it does the imperfections of man, also give us the opportunity to perfect our union. That is what we honor on days of national commemoration. Those aspects of the American experience that are enduring, and the determination to move forward as one people. More than monuments, that will be the legacy of 9/11. A legacy of firefighters who walked into fire and soldiers who signed up to serve, of workers who raised new towers and citizens who faced down their private fears, most of all of children who realized the dreams of their parents. It will be said that we kept the faith, that we took a painful blow, and we emerged stronger than before. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. With a just God as our guide, let us honor those who've been lost. Let us rededicate ourselves to the ideals that define our nation, and let us look to the future with hearts full of hope. May God bless the memory of those we lost, and may God bless the United States of America.
The President of the United States at the Kennedy Center in Washington, and I want to remind you that this event was supposed to be held at the National Cathedral because of the damage that the cathedral received during Hurricane Irene. It was moved to this venue, and so that shows you that Americans can move on and get past things. The President, I thought, was very poignant at the end. He said something that a lot of people who grew up in church, they know this verse: weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And I think that's apropos as we stand here on the eve of a political debate where so often our country is divided over rhetoric and what happens to the future of our country. I think it's important for us to realize when it comes to what happened on 9/11, imagine where you were 10 years ago. Many people thought that they would never recover the country from this. America is a place of hope and a place of dreams and a place that endures no matter what. We will always be America. We will always be a country that wins out in the end. And as we look at these beams of light that are coming up from that sacred ground on 9/11, that sacred ground where the World Trade Centers once stood, we're going to go to break. And I want you to remember, again, this is America. There is always hope. 10 years later, we celebrate the lives that are lost. And we don't talk about the deaths. We celebrate the lives. We're back in a moment. For the children of 9/11, this isn't just the anniversary of an American catastrophe. It means it's been 10 years since they lost a mom or dad. Looking at the World Trade Center site where so many lives were lost, you can't help but think about these young faces of tragedy.
On 9/11, I lost my father, John Robinson Lenore.
Benjamin Keith Clark.
He's an executive chef.
My dad was Alvin Romero.
My uncle's name was Edward Lichshine.
Sergeant John Coughlin.
I was in my 5th grade class, and our teacher said, everyone look outside the window.
My teacher said it was just a little accident. Then I realized that it was much bigger than that.
My first thought was, is my father okay?
We were all in her bedroom watching this TV show.
I remember asking her, like, oh, Mom, what movie are you watching?
I remember she said that they're all gone.
I guess it just didn't click to me that what I was watching just wasn't a movie.
And, like, I remember looking out the window just thinking the whole thing was a dream.
Nobody else has lost a parent on national television, on the news. Nobody else has seen it happen over and over again. And that's something that we all have to live with.
My mother sat us down and had every cop's kid's worst nightmare talk that Daddy wasn't coming home. My little sister at the time just screamed out loud. All of a sudden, I was the oldest of the family. I had to step up right at that exact minute.
I was very, very angry. I know I punched the wall.
And I saw the world as like a gross, vulgar place full of hatred. I do not remember a good 2 years of my life because I, just emotionally have blocked it all out.
Yeah, I don't really remember anything about it. Sometimes I think it was a better thing that I didn't know him and then he was taken away from me, or if it was a worse thing that I didn't get to spend the little time I would have known with him. And when your friends complain oh, my dad's so annoying, or he won't let me go out, or he won't let me do this, it's you get mad because you would do anything to have that. And they complain and they don't really appreciate what they have.
If we're talking about 9/11 in class,
and everybody would turn around and stare at me.
They almost know that I was affected by it directly.
Sometimes it makes me feel a tiny bit agitated because it's not like I would want to be known as, oh, his dad died, his dad was killed. I don't want to be known as that. I just want them to know me as me, for who I am. Anywhere you went, we're right away labeled as the 9/11 kids.
You always get people who are trying to help saying, I know how you feel, everything's going to be okay.
Brittany, I'm sorry that this happened to you, or Brittany, is there anything we can do? It makes me feel kind of cornered when everyone around me is oh, yeah, Brittany, you lost your father, are you okay?
I really think people expect us to fail sometimes. Every night I need to talk to my mom and my brother right before I go to sleep because I'm always afraid something's going to happen to them too.
Because I'm afraid of, if I lost one parent, I'm afraid of losing the other.
Life is short.
It could be taken away in an instant, just like it did on that Tuesday morning.
I cry more, I grieve more because now I recognize what I've lost.
My mother will stand in the middle of the kitchen and be like, can you please stop acting just like your father?
But my mom always tells my sister and I that we have his smile or his sense of humor.
It took me a really long time to, not move on from the situation, but to accept the situation. But in the end, we came out pretty well.
I'm Don Lemon. I'll see you back here at a special time, 1 hour, 11 p.m. Eastern. CNN. Thanks for joining us, everyone. You're in the CNN Newsroom. I'm Don Lemon, live in Tampa, Florida, for Monday night's CNN Tea Party GOP debate. Our preview is just ahead, but first we start with the 10th anniversary of 9/11. It's been a long day of deep emotions and quiet memories. America pauses to remember the attacks of 9/11 exactly 10 years ago. The site of the World Trade Center opened today as a memorial to those who died. Large square fountains occupy the space where the Twin Towers once stood. CNN's Poppy Harlow has been there all day. And Poppy, I want to know what the reaction is now that the memorial has finally been opened. Is there some degree of comfort?
I think there absolutely is, Don. From all the people that I talked to today, those that lost their children, if you could imagine that, those that lost fathers, brothers, mothers, aunts, and uncles. For a lot of them, this was cathartic in a sense and this was a closure and also a rebirth for some of them. It was the first time this morning that they were able to walk in those gates, walk to the memorial, those stunning pools, with each and every one of the names of those who lost their life on 9/11 at the Twin Towers etched in stone. Many of them went up and they would rub their hand over the name of their loved one. It was a very touching moment in my mind. Something else as it got dark here in Lower Manhattan, I want to show you a shot that means a lot, especially to New Yorkers. This is a shot that I have watched over the past 10 years. As you see, the blue lights reflecting of the Twin Towers, reminding us where they stood, what they meant. It's a shot that we see really just once a year, and now on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. What stood with me, Don, looking back at today, is the personal stories. There's no way to tell all of them, but I want to tell you one that really struck me. It's about a girl named Andrea Haberman. She was 25 years old from a small town outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Her first business trip ever. She flew here. She went to a meeting on the 92nd floor of the World Trade Center. I sat down today with her father. Take a listen to what he told me. You lost your daughter, Andrea, 10 years ago.
My daughter, Andrea, was murdered 10 years ago. I didn't lose her. It was on the 92nd floor. All of them were murdered that day.
The North Tower?
North Tower.
This is Andrea, right?
This is. Close to the heart.
I've heard from some people that they felt a bit of hope today, that today wasn't as somber as some other anniversaries.
Oh, the memorial is beautiful. It is. It's been a long 10 years. I was honored to read names again. Like I told you, I don't think that they'll be doing that in the next years, so it was a passage for me.
What will you leave here feeling tonight?
I'm with friends. I have a whole New York family.
That's what's come out of this.
I'm blessed.
If you can believe it, someone going through a tragedy like that saying, I am blessed, Don. Certainly leaving here feeling much different than he and his family did when they lost their daughter 10 years ago. He told me that the moment that they saw the plane hit the tower, they got in their car from Wisconsin and drove out here to New York trying to rescue and find their daughter. There's a book being written about her. I want to point people to the website because I've read part of it today, and it's just an amazing story. It's called Just a Few Sleeps Away. And everyone has this story. This is one of about 3,000 stories, Don, but that's what sticks with us today. Of course, a somber day, a sad day, but also a day of renewal, a day of hope, and I think a day of moving on for some here this morning, throughout the ceremony, and throughout the day today.
Poppy Harlow, thank you so much for your reporting. President Barack Obama traveled to all three locations devastated by the terror attacks 10 years ago today. This afternoon, he attended a remembrance at the Pentagon where 184 victims died. Earlier, he walked the fields of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, remembering the 40 lost there. And the president began his day at a ceremony at Ground Zero where 2,753 people were killed. The First Lady and President and Mrs. Bush walked with him. During the service, Mr. Obama gave a reading from the Bible. And tonight, he spoke at a concert for hope held at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And make sure you join us later in the broadcast when we look back on this full day of remembrance. The anniversaries, moments to remember, will show you how our nation paid its respects. I want to listen now to the president earlier tonight in Washington.
And in the decades since, much has changed for Americans. We've known war and recession, passionate debates and political divides. We can never get back the lives that were lost on that day or the Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in the wars that followed. And yet, today, it is worth remembering what has not changed. Our character as a nation has not changed. Our faith in God and in each other, that has not changed. Our belief in America, born of a timeless ideal that men and women should govern themselves, that all people are created equal and deserve the same freedom to determine their own destiny. That belief, through tests and trials, has only been strengthened. These past 10 years have shown that America does not give in to fear. The rescue workers who rushed to the scene, the firefighters who charged up the stairs, the passengers who stormed the cockpit, these patriots define the very nature of courage. Over the years, we've also seen a more quiet form of heroism. In the ladder company that lost so many men and still suits up and saves lives every day. The businesses that have been rebuilt from nothing, the burn victim who's bounced back, the families who press on.
Fighter jets were scrambled today because of reports of suspicious activities aboard 2 domestic flights. Both planes landed safely and there were no further signs of trouble, but 3 people were taken into custody from a Frontier airline flight from Denver after it landed in Detroit. F-16s also shadowed an American Airlines flight from Los Angeles to New York after reports that several passengers were behaving strangely. The 9/11 anniversary was honored in Afghanistan too, but soldiers at one base didn't have much time to dwell on it. They were left reeling by a suicide attack that wounded 77 Americans. Here's Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr.
All 77 NATO service members wounded in a Saturday attack against a coalition base in Afghanistan are U.S. troops. A spokesman for the International Security Assistance Force said on Sunday. 2 Afghan civilians and 25 others were also wounded in the attack, which occurred on the eve of the 10th anniversary of Al-Qaeda's attack on the United States. None of the U.S. injuries is life-threatening, and those wounded are expected to return to duty shortly. It was a suicide truck bomb at a U.S. base in Wardak province in central eastern Afghanistan where the attack took place. Barbara Starr, CNN, Washington.
And next, we turn our attention to politics. CNN and the Tea Party Express will be hosting a Republican debate just hours from now. And we look to the connections between the Tea Party and the GOP. And a scene of excitement becomes a scene of horror when a balcony full of people collapses. Thousands remember the heroes of 9/11 today. President Obama laid a wreath at the Pentagon Memorial Site. 184 people died when American Airlines Flight 77 flew into the side of the building. CNN's Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr was in the building that Tuesday morning doing her job as a correspondent when the plane hit. September 11th just happens to be her birthday.
You were either here that day or you weren't. For the people who work in the building today who were there 10 years ago, I don't think you can ever forget. I'm sitting here and I'm seeing the flames in front of me on this beautiful morning. 9/11 is my birthday, and I woke up that morning, looked out the window, the weather was beautiful, and I thought, how little time could I possibly spend at work? I'll put something nice on, I'll go out to dinner with friends, and it'll be a nice birthday. But then, New York. 10 years ago, this was the area where the Pentagon press corps was working. That morning, we'd been watching the attacks unfold in New York. I came out in this hallway, and suddenly there was a Pentagon policeman coming from that direction, running down this hallway, yelling, "Get out, get out. Everybody get out. We've been hit. Get out." American Airlines Flight 77 slammed into the Pentagon. By the time I made my way from my office down there to this part of the hallway, it was full of people. We could smell the smoke. Hundreds of people coming into this hallway, coming down the stairs from the upper floors, coming up the stairs from the basement. The doors had closed shut due to the security alert, so it took a few minutes for them to open them and for people to begin to make their way out to safety. This entire side of the Pentagon was a wall of flame and black smoke. I remember seeing people coming out of the wreckage where the plane had hit, some covered in blood, trying to make their way to safety. Hundreds of workers had gathered over here. At one point, before a large number of police or fire personnel could even get here, they called for people who had any kind of emergency or medical training, and hundreds of military people came moving back in towards the wreckage to help in any way that they could. That's what it was really all about here. On that day, in this place, for the U.S. military, no retreat, no surrender. Barbara Starr, CNN, the Pentagon.
Barbara and many others remembering what happened 10 years ago today. More signs the end is near for the Muammar Gaddafi regime. His son flees to Niger. Also, a balcony crowded with people collapses during a festival, and people are seriously hurt. Those stories and more in your top stories next.